You're about to lose everything you built. Those 7 words, whispered across a sun-drenched beach, would save a billion-dollar empire and ignite something far more dangerous than corporate warfare. When single-father Daniel Reed stumbled onto his CEO's darkest secret, he had 48 hours to expose a conspiracy that reached the boardroom's highest levels. But the real threat wasn't the missing millions. It was the obsession hiding behind them. This is their story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this tale travels across the world. 6,847 words. The California coastline stretched endlessly in both directions, a ribbon of gold against impossible blue. Saturday afternoon heat shimmered off the sand in waves that made the distant pier look like a watercolor painting someone had left in the rain. Families dotted the beach, kids shrieking as they chased foam, teenagers sprawled on towels like seals, couples walking hand in hand through the shallows. Daniel Reed didn't fit any of those categories. He stood at the edge of the public access boardwalk, hands shoved deep in the pockets of his cargo shorts, squinting against the glare. His daughter Emma was spending the weekend with her mother, the first time in 3 weeks he'd had actual child-free hours, and his best friend Marcus had insisted he needed to remember what daylight looked like. "You're turning into a vampire, man," Marcus had said over the phone that morning. "Pale, nocturnal, avoiding human contact. Get outside before you start hissing at garlic." So here Daniel stood, 34 years old, recently divorced, perpetually exhausted, staring at an ocean he had zero interest in swimming in. He'd already checked his phone twice. Emma was fine. The sitter he'd arranged as backup, just in case her mother flaked, which happened about 40% of the time, had texted confirmation she was on standby. His work laptop sat in the car, 3 spreadsheets still needing review before Monday. He gave himself 10 more minutes. Then he'd grab coffee, head home, and pretend he'd had a relaxing day off. That's when he saw her. At first it was just movement in his peripheral vision, someone adjusting a beach chair about 50 yards down the sand. But something made him look twice. Maybe it was the deliberate solitude. While everyone else clustered in groups, this person had claimed a spot far from the nearest umbrella, creating an island of privacy in the chaos. Daniel's analytical mind cataloged details automatically. Expensive lounge chair, designer beach bag, oversized sunglasses that probably cost more than his car payment, dark hair pulled into a careless knot, a black bikini that suggested either supreme confidence or complete indifference to attention. And beside the chair, weighted down with a water bottle, a manila folder thick with papers. His eyes locked onto that folder the way a bloodhound catches a scent. Because Daniel Reed had spent the last 8 years working as a senior financial analyst at Meridian Technologies, one of the fastest-growing tech companies in California. And in those 8 years, he'd developed an almost supernatural ability to spot financial documents at a distance. The size, the color, the way they were stacked. His brain processed it all instantly. Those weren't vacation reading. Those were corporate reports. He started walking before he consciously decided to move. The sand dragged at his sneakers. He hadn't bothered taking them off as he angled down the beach. Not directly toward her, just close enough to see if his instincts were right. The closer he got, the more details emerged. The folder wasn't just thick, it was organized. Tabs stuck out at precise intervals. A yellow highlighter peeked from between pages. And the woman wasn't relaxing. She was working. One hand held her phone, the other tapped rhythmically against her thigh. The unconscious gesture of someone calculating, planning, problem-solving. Even stretched out on a beach chair in the middle of a Saturday afternoon, she radiated the kind of focused intensity Daniel recognized instantly. Because he lived it, every single day. 20 feet away now. Close enough that he could see the papers more clearly when a sudden gust of wind caught the top page and sent it tumbling across the sand. The woman lunged for it, but Daniel was faster. His hand shot out and trapped the page against his leg before it could escape. He glanced down reflexively. Just a split-second look, the kind of automatic scan his brain did with any numbers, and froze. Revenue projections, quarterly forecasts, and in the bottom right corner a logo he saw every single day on his company ID badge. Meridian Technologies. His head snapped up. The woman had pulled off her sunglasses and was staring at him with an expression somewhere between irritation and resignation. Her eyes were a striking gray-green, sharp and assessing. Even squinting against the sun, she looked like someone accustomed to being the smartest person in any room she entered. "Thanks," she said, extending her hand for the paper. Her voice carried the crisp edges of someone who didn't waste words. "Wind's picking up." Daniel handed it over, but his mind was already 3 steps ahead, cross-referencing faces, voices, company directories. Dark hair, late 30s, gray-green eyes. That particular shade of controlled intensity. Oh no. "Ms. Brooks," he said automatically. Her expression shifted, surprise flickering across features that probably didn't show surprise often. She studied him more carefully now, and Daniel watched the same recognition process unfold behind her eyes. "You work for me," she said. Not a question. "Daniel Reed, Financial Analysis, 4th floor." Natalie Brooks, CEO of Meridian Technologies, sat up straighter in her chair. Even in a bikini on a beach, the movement somehow conveyed authority. "Daniel Reed, you wrote the risk assessment report on the quantum acquisition." He blinked. Out of 400 employees, she knew his name, knew his work. The quantum report had been 6 months ago. "Yes, ma'am." "That was good work. Detailed without being pedantic. You caught the inventory discrepancy no one else flagged." She gestured to the empty chair beside her. "Small world." Daniel hesitated. Every professional instinct screamed that sitting down would be wildly inappropriate. She was his CEO. She was in a bikini. He was technically off the clock, but still very much an employee. This was the kind of situation HR orientations warned about, but she was already setting her phone aside, clearly expecting him to sit. And beneath the professional awkwardness, his analytical mind had latched onto something far more pressing. That page he'd caught, the numbers he'd glimpsed. Something was wrong. He sat. "Enjoying the view?" Natalie asked, a hint of amusement coloring her tone. Other men would have stammered, would have blushed, and insisted they hadn't been looking. Daniel had learned, through single fatherhood, divorce, and too many years surviving on too little sleep, that honesty was faster than politeness. "You," he said simply. Her eyebrow arched. "Direct." "Not like that." He gestured toward the folder. "Your numbers." Something's off. The amusement vanished. Natalie's entire demeanor shifted in the space of a heartbeat, from relaxed to razor-focused. "Explain." Daniel pointed to the folder. "May I?" She studied him for a long moment, weighing risk against curiosity. Then she handed it over. He flipped it open, and his world narrowed to columns and calculations. This was where Daniel lived, not in small talk or social navigation, but in the clean logic of numbers. They didn't lie, didn't hide. They just were. And if you knew how to read them, they told stories more honest than any words. The first 3 pages looked perfect. Revenue up 18% year over year, profit margins healthy, acquisition projections aggressive but achievable. The kind of growth that made investors salivate and competitors panic. But Daniel didn't stop at the first 3 pages. His finger traced down a column of vendor payments, then cross-referenced against the operational expense summary. Paused. Went back. Checked again. "Here," he said quietly, tapping a line halfway down page 7. "These payments, what are they for?" Natalie leaned over, close enough that he caught a hint of coconut sunscreen. "Vendor services, standard operating expenses." "They're categorized that way," Daniel agreed. "But look at the amounts. 37,000, 42,000, 51,000, paid every 2 weeks like clockwork to 3 different vendors." He flipped to another page. "Now look at your actual operational costs, the real expenses for the same period." She looked. He watched her eyes track the numbers, watched the exact moment comprehension hit. "Those payments aren't in the operational total," she said slowly. "No, they're being reported as operational expenses, but they're not calculated as operational expenses, which means someone created a category that looks legitimate on the surface, but functions completely differently in the actual accounting." "Why would anyone do that?" Daniel met her eyes. "To hide where the money's really going." The beach sounds seemed suddenly very distant. Children laughing, waves crashing, a dog barking somewhere down the sand. All of it felt like it belonged to a different world. A simpler one, where CEOs didn't discover potential fraud while trying to enjoy a Saturday off. Natalie took the folder back, flipping through pages with increasing urgency. How much? Without seeing the full records? Rough estimate? Daniel ran the numbers in his head. Somewhere between 12 and 15 million over the last 18 months. Her face went pale beneath the tan. That's the quantum acquisition budget, she whispered. That's the entire reserve fund we allocated for equipment, integration, personnel transfers. If that money's been redirected, she stopped, closing her eyes. The board meeting. Lucas said the acquisition was underperforming because we didn't budget enough for infrastructure. He wanted to reallocate funds from R&D to cover the shortfall. Let me guess, Daniel said. Lucas is on the board? Lucas Kane, he's been pushing hard to take a more active role in financial oversight, said I was spreading resources too thin. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I thought he was trying to help. Daniel had never met Lucas Kane personally, but he'd sat through enough earnings calls to recognize the name. Old money, Silicon Valley royalty, the kind of investor who treated board positions like pieces on a chessboard. You need to audit everything, Daniel said. Every payment. Every vendor, I can't. He stopped. What? Natalie's jaw tightened. My CFO resigned 3 weeks ago. Took a position in New York, gave me 48 hours notice. I've been scrambling to cover the gap while we search for a replacement. The only people who have full access to the financial systems right now are me, Lucas, and... She stopped. And whoever's doing this, Daniel finished. They sat in silence. The sun had shifted, casting their shadows long across the sand. Natalie Brooks, billionaire CEO, looked suddenly exhausted. Not physically, though Daniel suspected she probably was, but deeper. The kind of tired that came from realizing someone you trusted had been undermining you for over a year. I have a board meeting Monday, she said quietly. Lucas called it. Emergency session to address concerning financial irregularities in the quantum acquisition. He's been laying groundwork for weeks, getting other board members worried, asking pointed questions about my leadership. She looked at Daniel. He's going to try to force me out. He's been setting you up, Daniel said. The pieces clicked together with awful clarity. The missing money, the acquisition underperforming, your CFO leaving suddenly. He's creating a narrative where you're mismanaging company resources, then positioning himself as the solution. And I walked right into it. Natalie's hands clenched into fists. I trusted him. He was my father's friend. He invested in Meridian when we were nothing but a pitch deck and a prototype. I thought... She stopped, shaking her head. It doesn't matter what I thought. Daniel knew that tone. It was the same one he'd used 2 years ago when his ex-wife admitted she'd been having an affair for 6 months. The sound of someone forcibly shutting down emotion because breaking down wasn't an option yet. How long until the board meeting? He asked. 48 hours, Monday morning, 9 a.m. Then that's how long we have. Natalie's eyes snapped to his. We? You need someone who can trace the money, Daniel said. Someone who knows Meridian systems, understands the acquisition structure, and can work fast. That's me. You have a life, a family. I can't ask you to... I'm a single dad with primary custody. Daniel interrupted. My daughter's with her mother this weekend. I've got nothing but time and a really strong coffee maker. He pulled out his phone. I just need access to the financial servers and someone to tell me where to start digging. She studied him with an intensity that would have been uncomfortable if he weren't so focused on the problem. Why? She asked. Why would you do this? Daniel thought about Emma. About the bedtime stories and the careful budgeting and the way he'd taught himself to see problems before they became catastrophes because he didn't have the luxury of being blindsided. About how he'd built a life out of paying attention when everyone else looked away. Because the numbers don't lie, he said, and someone needs to listen to what they're saying. Natalie stood abruptly. My rental house is 15 minutes from here. Cliffside place with actual Wi-Fi and a kitchen table big enough to spread out documents. She started gathering her things. Phone, sunscreen, the damning folder. I've got full system access on my laptop and 3 days' worth of Chinese takeout menus. You really want to spend your weekend doing forensic accounting? Daniel rose, brushing sand off his shorts. I've had worse Saturdays. She smiled, a real smile this time, sharp and fierce. Let's go ruin Lucas Kane's whole career. The rental house clung to the cliff like it had grown there, all glass walls and modern angles. Natalie's car, a sleek black Tesla that probably cost more than Daniel made in 2 years, hummed up the driveway and into a garage that looked like it belonged in an architecture magazine. "Make yourself comfortable," she said, leading him through a living room that was more window than wall. The ocean stretched out below them, vast and indifferent. "I'm going to change and grab my laptop. Coffee, water, something stronger?" "Coffee," Daniel said. "Strong. My kind of person." She disappeared upstairs and Daniel stood awkwardly in the middle of a room that probably cost more per night than his mortgage payment. Everything was aggressively expensive in that casual way rich people had. The kind of place where the furniture looked uncomfortable because it was too busy being a statement piece. He pulled out his phone and texted the backup sitter. "Everything still good? Might need you on standby tomorrow, too." Her response came back immediately. "All good. Emma's mom picked her up on time for once. Text if you need me Sunday." Relief loosened the knot in his chest. One less thing to worry about. Natalie reappeared in yoga pants and an oversized MIT sweatshirt, her hair still wet from what must have been the world's fastest shower. She carried a laptop under one arm and a folder thick enough to double as a weapon under the other. "Kitchen table," she said, jerking her head toward an open-concept space where marble countertops gleamed under recessed lighting. "Fair warning, I stress clean. If this goes badly, you might find me reorganizing cabinets at 2 a.m. "I stress budget," Daniel admitted. Emma's college fund spreadsheet has 17 different scenarios and color-coded probability ratings. Natalie's laugh was surprised and genuine. "We're going to get along just fine." The kitchen table became command central. Natalie's laptop, password-protected with what looked like military-grade security, opened to reveal access to Meridian's entire financial infrastructure. Daniel's own laptop, pulled from his car, looked embarrassingly pedestrian by comparison, but it had his personal notes on the quantum acquisition and analysis tools he'd spent years perfecting. "Start with vendor payments," Natalie said, pulling up the accounting system. "I want to see every transaction over $10,000 for the last 2 years. Daniel cracked his knuckles. This was the part he was good at. The part that made sense. Numbers didn't have custody arrangements or emotional affairs or promises they couldn't keep. They just were. He dove in. An hour passed, then 2. Natalie made coffee, expensive, single-origin stuff that tasted like it had opinions about politics, and they worked in focused silence. Daniel built spreadsheets, cross-referenced transactions, flagged anomalies. Natalie pulled contract files, verified vendor registrations, checked incorporation dates. "These 3 companies," Daniel said, highlighting a cluster of entries. "Apex Solutions, Redline Consulting, and Vertex Innovations. They're receiving the bulk of the questionable payments." Natalie typed rapidly. "Checking business registrations? Okay." Apex Solutions was incorporated 18 months ago in Delaware. No website, no employees listed in any database, just a P.O. box and a registered agent. "Shell Company," Daniel said. "Redline Consulting. Same thing. Incorporated 17 months ago, same registered agent, same nothing." "Vertex?" 16 months. She sat back. Someone set up 3 fake companies in Delaware, staggered the incorporation dates to avoid pattern recognition, and has been billing Meridian for services never rendered. "Not just billing," Daniel corrected. "Billing in a way that gets past standard auditing. These amounts are just under the threshold that would trigger executive approval. They're categorized as operational expenses, which have more flexibility than capital expenditures. And they're spread across different departments, so no single manager would see the full picture." Natalie's expression darkened. "This is sophisticated. Whoever did this knows our systems inside and out." "Your CFO would have that knowledge," Daniel said carefully. "Richard?" She shook her head. "I've known him for 8 years. He's neurotic and overcautious, and probably the most honest person I've ever worked with. That's why his resignation felt so wrong. He sent an email at midnight on a Wednesday saying he'd accepted a position in New York and was leaving immediately." "Do you have that email?" She pulled it up. Daniel read it twice, his analyst brain flagging every detail. This doesn't sound like him, Natalie said. Richard wrote novels for email. This is 4 sentences. And he sent it at midnight, Daniel added. Did you try calling him? Went straight to voicemail. His work phone was disconnected. I sent messages to his personal email, but she stopped. I never heard back. They looked at each other. Pull up the Delaware registrations again, Daniel said. Who's listed as the registered agent for those shell companies? Natalie's fingers flew across the keyboard. The screen populated with corporate filing information, dense, bureaucratic, deliberately opaque. And there, listed as registered agent for all 3 companies, Kane Holdings, LLC. The silence stretched out, heavy with implication. Lucas, Natalie whispered. Lucas set this up. He created fake companies, paid himself millions, made it look like the acquisition was failing because of my mismanagement, then forced out my CFO so there'd be no one to catch him. And called a board meeting to capitalize on the chaos, Daniel finished. He's not trying to fix a problem, he's executing a plan. Natalie stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it just looked like the world was on fire. I built this company, she said quietly. My father and I, in a garage with maxed-out credit cards and a dream bigger than our budget. We survived the dot-com crash, the 2008 recession, a dozen competitors with better funding. When Dad died, everyone said I'd run it into the ground within a year. Lucas was the only board member who publicly supported me. Her voice cracked. He gave the eulogy at my father's funeral. Daniel didn't have words for that kind of betrayal, so he did what he did best, focused on what could be fixed. We have 48 hours, he said. That's enough time to build a case. Paper trail, transaction records, corporate filings, it's all documented. We can prove what he did. And if we can't? Natalie turned to face him. If he's covered his tracks better than we think? If the board believes his version instead of mine? Daniel met her eyes. Then we make sure our version is so thoroughly documented that belief isn't a factor. We turn this into math, and math doesn't take sides. She studied him for a long moment. You're different than I expected. How so? Most people in your position would be terrified right now, or trying to use this situation for leverage. But you're just solving the problem. Daniel shrugged. I'm a single dad. I learned a long time ago that panic is a luxury I can't afford. You either fix what's broken, or you figure out how to live with it broken. This? He gestured at the laptop. This is fixable. Something shifted in Natalie's expression, exhaustion giving way to determination. Okay, let's fix it. They worked through the night. Daniel traced money flows, building a timeline of every fraudulent payment. Natalie cross-referenced emails, board minutes, strategic planning documents. Together, they constructed a narrative that was damning in its clarity. Lucas Kane had spent 18 months systematically stealing from Meridian Technologies while simultaneously positioning himself to take control. Around 2 a.m., Natalie disappeared into the kitchen and returned with sandwiches that were more elaborate than anything Daniel had eaten in weeks. You stress cook too? He asked. I stress everything. It's exhausting. She bit into her sandwich. Tell me about your daughter. The question caught him off guard. Emma? You mentioned her. She's with her mother this weekend? Daniel nodded, pulling out his phone to show a photo. Emma, at 7 years old, missing both front teeth, grinning at the camera with a soccer ball under one arm. She's beautiful, Natalie said. Looks like trouble. The best kind, Daniel agreed. Smart as hell, stubborn as concrete, and completely fearless. Last week she informed me she wants to be either an astronaut or a professional dinosaur expert. Excellent career goals. I'm researching paleontology programs just in case. He tucked the phone away. The divorce was hard on her. Her mom and I tried to keep things civil, but kids know. They always know. So I promised Emma 2 things. I'd never lie to her, and I'd never miss something important. And you keep those promises. I try. Daniel took a long drink of water. Which is why I learned to see problems early, because the worst thing you can do to a kid is let them be blindsided. If something's going wrong, money, health, relationships, You deal with it before it becomes a catastrophe they can't understand. Natalie was quiet for a moment. Your ex-wife? She's the one who had the affair? Daniel raised an eyebrow. How did you know? The way you said tried to keep things civil. People don't use that phrasing unless one party made civility very difficult. She smiled sadly. I'm good at reading subtext. Occupational hazard? Survival skill. She pushed her plate away. My father used to say that in business, everyone lies. Not because they're bad people, but because everyone's protecting something. The key is figuring out what they're protecting and whether it threatens what you're protecting. What are you protecting? Daniel asked. Everything I built. Everything he built. The idea that hard work and good products and treating people fairly actually matters in the end. Her voice hardened. And I'll be damned if Lucas Kane gets to take that away because I was too trusting to see what he really was. They returned to work with renewed focus. By 4 a.m., they had everything. A complete record of fraudulent transactions. Proof that the shell companies were registered to Lucas's holdings. Email chains showing Lucas pushing for Richard's responsibilities to be temporarily redistributed right before Richard's sudden departure. Even a suspicious pattern in board minutes where Lucas consistently steered conversation away from detailed financial reviews. We need Richard, Natalie said, rubbing her eyes. If he testifies that Lucas pressured him to leave, that he felt threatened or coerced, then we have conspiracy to commit fraud, Daniel finished. But we don't know where he is. I might. Natalie pulled up her personal email, scrolling back months. Richard's daughter goes to Stanford. He used to complain about how expensive her apartment was, how she insisted on living in that specific neighborhood because it was close to her research lab. If he's in New York, like his email said, maybe she knows. She stopped. What? Natalie turned the laptop to show him an email thread from 3 months ago. Richard complaining about his daughter's apartment. Natalie sympathizing. Richard joking that he'd looked up the building's property records out of parental paranoia and discovered the landlord was actually a subsidiary of a tech company using the building for employee housing subsidies. I remember this conversation, Natalie said slowly. He said it was shady, but technically legal. The landlord was, she typed rapidly, Kane Properties Management. Daniel felt the pieces click into place with sickening clarity. Lucas owns the building where Richard's daughter lives. And if Lucas threatened her, or threatened to expose something about the subsidized housing arrangement, or just implied that bad things might happen if Richard didn't cooperate, then Richard would run, Daniel said, because protecting your kid comes before everything else. Natalie was already typing, pulling up property records, cross-referencing corporate holdings. If we can prove Lucas used Richard's daughter as leverage, that's witness intimidation. Her phone rang. They both jumped. It was nearly 4:30 in the morning. Nobody called at 4:30 unless something was desperately wrong. Natalie answered. Hello? Daniel watched her face go through a series of expressions, confusion, shock, anger, and finally something that looked like fear. I understand, she said tightly. Yes, I'll handle it. Thank you for the warning. She hung up. That was Jennifer from PR, Natalie said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. Someone leaked documents to the press. Internal memos, financial projections, emails, all taken out of context to make it look like I've been hiding the quantum acquisition failure from the board. When? They're scheduled to publish in 3 hours. Jennifer's trying to negotiate a delay, but Natalie's laugh was bitter. Lucas timed this perfectly. The story breaks Sunday morning. By Monday's board meeting, I'll be on the defensive before I even walk into the room. Daniel's mind raced. They had evidence. They had proof. But evidence didn't matter if Natalie was destroyed in the court of public opinion before she could present it. Can you call an emergency board meeting? He asked. Before the story breaks? Not without Lucas's approval. He controls the schedule. She pressed her palms against her eyes. I'm going to lose everything. Years of work, my father's legacy, all of it. Hey. Daniel stood, moving around the table. Look at me. Natalie lowered her hands. Her eyes were red-rimmed from exhaustion and stress, but still sharp. We're not done yet, Daniel said. We still have 3 hours before publication. That's enough time. Time for what? To change the narrative. He grabbed his laptop. You can't stop the press from publishing those documents, but you can give them something better to publish instead. Thus, understanding dawned across her face. A counter-story. With evidence they can verify independently. Lucas leaked selected documents to make you look bad. We leak the complete picture to show what he's actually doing. Daniel was already typing, organizing files, preparing data for release. Every fraudulent transaction, every shell company, every connection to Lucas. We dump it all. The press will fact-check, Natalie warned. If we're wrong about anything, we're not wrong. The numbers don't lie. He looked up at her. But you need to be sure. Once we do this, there's no taking it back. You'll be accusing a prominent board member of fraud, witness intimidation, and conspiracy. If we're missing something, if Lucas has a defense we haven't considered, he doesn't. Natalie's voice was steel. I've spent the last 6 hours looking at every angle. This is real. He did this. She sat down at her laptop. Give me the file list. I'll start organizing it for release. They worked until sunrise, crafting a disclosure that was thorough, documented, and devastating. Every claim backed by evidence. Every connection verified. By the time light started creeping through the windows, they had a package that would turn Lucas Kane's calculated attack into his own destruction. Ready? Daniel asked. Natalie's finger hovered over the send button, an email to 3 major business journalists, all of whom had covered Meridian before, all of whom would recognize the significance of what they were being given. My father used to say that the truth was its own reward, she said quietly. I never quite believed him. Truth gets people fired, gets them sued, gets them destroyed by people with better lawyers and deeper pockets. But silence gets them destroyed anyway, Daniel said, just slower. She smiled. When did you become a philosopher? Around the same time I became a single dad. You learn a lot about truth when you're explaining divorce to a 5-year-old. Natalie took a deep breath. Here's to truth then, whatever it costs. She hit send. The email disappeared into the digital void. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Natalie's phone started ringing. That was fast, she muttered, glancing at the screen. It's Michael Chen, Wall Street Journal. She answered. Michael, thanks for calling so quickly. Daniel couldn't hear the other end of the conversation, but he watched Natalie's responses. Yes, everything in the email is verifiable. Yes, she was aware of the implications. Yes, she understood this would likely result in legal action. No, she wasn't concerned about Kane's response because the evidence spoke for itself. She hung up 20 minutes later. He's running it. Front page business section. Online edition goes live in an hour. The others? Her phone rang again, then again. By the time the sun had fully risen, all 3 journalists had committed to running the story. More were calling, asking for comment, requesting interviews. The narrative had shifted. Instead of CEO hides acquisition failure, the headlines would read, Board member accused of multi-million-dollar fraud. Natalie set her phone to silent and slumped back in her chair. We did it. Not yet, Daniel said. We changed the story, but Lucas still has the board meeting tomorrow. He's still going to show up and defend himself. Let him. Natalie's exhaustion was evident, but beneath it, something fierce and unbreakable had emerged. I've got the evidence, I've got the press, and now I've got advance warning that he's going to attack. She looked at Daniel. You should go home. Get some sleep. You've done more than anyone could have asked. Daniel checked his phone. The backup sitter had texted, Emma's mom dropping her off at 6 p.m. tonight. Still need me? He had 12 hours before Emma came home. 12 hours to shower, sleep, and try to process the fact that he'd just spent the last 18 hours helping his CEO expose a conspiracy. I'll be back tomorrow, he said, for the board meeting. Natalie blinked. Daniel, you don't have to. Yes, I do. He started packing his laptop. You're going into that room alone to face someone who's been systematically destroying you for 18 months. The least I can do is be there as backup. I don't need protection. I know, but you shouldn't have to do this without anyone in your corner. He paused. My dad died when I was 16. Heart attack, no warning. And the thing I remember most wasn't the funeral or the grief. It was my mom standing in the kitchen 3 days later, trying to figure out how to pay the mortgage and the hospital bills and the everything else. And nobody helped. Everyone gave condolences, but nobody actually showed up. Natalie's expression softened. So you show up? Always. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. He headed for the door. I'll see you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Daniel? He turned back. Thank you, Natalie said simply, for seeing what everyone else missed, for believing me, for... She gestured helplessly. All of it. Daniel smiled. The numbers don't lie, Ms. Brooks. They just needed someone to listen. He drove home through Sunday morning traffic, his brain still buzzing with spreadsheets and strategies. His phone was full of missed calls from Marcus, who'd probably seen the news breaking and was having a justified panic attack about Daniel's involvement. But that could wait. Right now, Daniel needed to sleep, to reset, to remember that he had a daughter coming home in 12 hours who would want to tell him about her weekend and probably needed help with a school project she'd forgotten about until the last minute. That was his real life. Single fatherhood and soccer practices and making sure Emma had lunch money. The corporate warfare was just a detour. Except as Daniel pulled into his driveway, he couldn't shake the image of Natalie standing in that glass house, backlit by sunrise, looking like someone who'd just decided to burn the world down rather than let it destroy her quietly. He recognized that look. He'd worn it himself 2 years ago when he decided that rebuilding his life as a single father was possible. Difficult, exhausting, frequently terrifying, but possible. Maybe that's why he'd agreed to help. Not because Natalie Brooks was his CEO or because the problem was intellectually interesting, but because he understood what it felt like to stand alone against something that should have crushed you. And sometimes the difference between surviving and breaking was having one person say, I believe you, let's fix this. Daniel unlocked his front door, dropped his laptop on the couch, and collapsed into bed still wearing his shoes. Tomorrow would bring the board meeting, Lucas's defense, whatever legal nightmare was about to unfold. But tonight, or technically this morning, Daniel Reed slept the sleep of someone who'd done the right thing, even if he had no idea yet what that choice would cost. 6,421 words. Daniel woke to his phone vibrating against the nightstand with the insistence of a small earthquake. He cracked one eye open, saw the time, 2:47 p.m., and groaned. 5 hours of sleep. His body felt like it had been assembled incorrectly. The phone continued its assault. He grabbed it without looking at the screen. What? Oh, good. You're alive. Marcus's voice carried equal parts relief and hysteria. I've been calling for 3 hours. Do you have any idea what's happening right now? Daniel sat up, running a hand through his hair. I'm aware. Aware? Aware? Daniel, every major business outlet is running stories about Meridian's CFO scandal. The Wall Street Journal is practically writing fan fiction about corporate espionage. And according to LinkedIn, which I only check ironically, by the way, you're connected to Natalie Brooks, who is currently the most searched CEO on Google. Marcus paused for breath. So I'll ask again, what the hell happened at the beach yesterday? I found some irregularities in the quarterly reports. Irregularities. He found irregularities. Marcus laughed, but it sounded slightly unhinged. Man, when normal people go to the beach, they get sunburned and overpriced ice cream. You somehow stumbled into corporate fraud. It wasn't a stumble. I was paying attention. To your CEO in a bikini, apparently. Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose. Marcus, I'm just saying, there are easier ways to get noticed at work. Employee of the Month campaigns, bringing donuts, not exposing multi-million-dollar conspiracies that could get you killed by angry billionaires. Nobody's getting killed. You don't know that. Rich people play by different rules. They have lawyers who eat regular lawyers for breakfast. Marcus's voice dropped. Seriously, though, are you okay? This is big. Like way bigger than anything you've dealt with before. Daniel thought about Natalie's face when she'd hit send on those emails. The way exhaustion and determination had warred across her features, and determination had won. I'm fine, he said. Just tired. Emma knows? Emma's 7. She knows I had to work this weekend. Daniel glanced at his clock again. She's coming home in 3 hours. I need to shower, eat something resembling food, and pretend to be a functional adult. Good luck with that last part. Marcus hesitated. You're going to the board meeting tomorrow, aren't you? Yes. Why? Daniel, you've done your part. You found the problem. You helped expose it. Let the lawyers and the board handle the rest. Because she shouldn't have to face him alone. Silence stretched between them. Then Marcus sighed. You're a good man, Danny. Possibly too good. Just be careful, okay? People like Lucas Kane don't go down quietly. After hanging up, Daniel forced himself into the shower. The hot water helped, but it couldn't wash away the feeling that he'd stepped off a cliff and was still waiting to hit bottom. His phone buzzed again while he was getting dressed. This time it was an email from Natalie, sent 20 minutes ago. Daniel. Board meeting moved to 8 a.m. instead of 9. Lucas's request. Probably trying to catch me off guard. You don't have to come, I mean that, but if you do, 4th floor conference room. N. He typed back. I'll be there. Her response was immediate. Thank you. Daniel spent the next 2 hours aggressively normal. He grocery shopped, picking up Emma's favorite cereal and the specific brand of orange juice she insisted tasted less angry than other brands. He confirmed her soccer practice schedule for the week. He reviewed her homework folder, which was predictably chaotic. When Emma burst through the door at 6 p.m., she was a tornado of energy and contradictions. Grass-stained knees, a new scrape on her elbow, and a huge grin missing those 2 front teeth. Dad, Mom took me to the science museum and I saw a real meteorite, and the lady said it was older than dinosaurs, which doesn't make sense because dinosaurs are the oldest thing, but she said space rocks are even older. And can I have a meteorite for my birthday? Daniel scooped her up, breathing in the little kid smell of sunscreen and adventure. Maybe a smaller meteorite, not a crater-making one. Deal. She wriggled down and headed for the kitchen. What's for dinner? I'm starving. Mom forgot lunch. Of course she did. Daniel bit back the comment and pulled out pasta ingredients. How about spaghetti? With the good sauce? Is there any other kind? While Emma chattered about museum exhibits and her friend Madison's new puppy and something complicated involving trading cards at recess, Daniel cooked and listened and tried not to think about tomorrow. This was what mattered, this routine, this small person who trusted him completely to show up, pay attention, remember the details. After dinner, bath time, and 2 chapters of their current book, something involving dragons and a girl who was definitely too brave for her own good, Emma finally settled into bed. Dad? Her voice was small in the darkness. Yeah, sweetheart? Are you okay? You seem far away. Daniel's chest tightened. 7 years old, and she could already read him perfectly. Just thinking about work stuff. Nothing bad. I promise. Is it important? He thought about Natalie, about the evidence they'd compiled, about walking into that conference room tomorrow to face down a man who'd spent 18 months orchestrating a betrayal. Yeah, he said honestly. It's important. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then, you're really good at important stuff. What makes you say that? Because you never miss the important things with me. Like when I lost my tooth at school and the nurse said you'd be too busy to pick me up early, but you came anyway. Or when Mom forgot my birthday last year, but you remembered even though you had the flu. She yawned. So if work stuff is important, you'll probably be really good at that too. Daniel had to swallow hard against the sudden emotion in his throat. Thanks, Em. That means a lot. Love you, Dad. Love you too, kiddo. Sleep well. He stood in her doorway for a long moment after she'd fallen asleep, watching her chest rise and fall with the perfect peace of childhood. Whatever happened tomorrow, he'd done this right. Been present. Been reliable. Been the parent Emma deserved. Everything else was just details. His phone lit up with a text from Natalie. Can't sleep, keep running through every possible counterargument Lucas might make. Daniel typed back. Want me to call? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then his phone rang. Hey, Natalie's voice sounded raw, like she'd been talking or crying or both. Sorry, I know it's late. It's fine. Emma just went to sleep. Daniel moved to the living room, keeping his voice low. What's got you worried? Everything. Nothing. I don't know. He heard her moving around, probably pacing. I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. What if the board doesn't believe the evidence? What if Lucas has somehow covered tracks we didn't find? What if they decide the scandal is too damaging and force me out anyway, guilty or not? Those are valid concerns, Daniel said, but they're not certainties. How are you so calm? I'm not calm. I'm compartmentalized. There's a difference. He settled into his worn couch. When my marriage fell apart, I spent 3 weeks having panic attacks every time Emma went to school. I was convinced something terrible would happen the second I wasn't watching. My therapist finally said, "You can't prevent every bad thing, so you prepare for what you can and trust yourself to handle what you can't." Natalie was quiet. "You went to therapy?" "Still go? Twice a month. Turns out single parenting is easier when you're not carrying around unprocessed trauma like luggage." He paused. "Have you eaten today?" "I don't remember." Natalie. Don't Natalie me. I've been busy preparing for professional warfare, which you can't do effectively if your blood sugar crashes mid-confrontation. Daniel stood, moving to his kitchen. "I'm going to say something and you're going to hate it, but I'm saying it anyway. You need to take care of yourself. Not because it's virtuous or self-care and Instagram bullshit, but because you literally cannot win tomorrow if you show up depleted." "I can't eat, my stomach's in knots." "Then drink something with calories, smoothie, protein shake, whatever you can manage." He heard her refrigerator open. "When's the last time you slept?" "I got maybe 2 hours this afternoon." "Okay, here's what you're going to do. You're going to eat something small. Then you're going to set an alarm for 6 a.m., which gives you 7 hours of potential sleep. You're going to put your phone across the room so you can't obsessively check news alerts. And you're going to trust that the evidence we compiled will speak for itself." "That's a lot of instructions from someone who's not my dad." Daniel smiled. "Considerate advice from someone who's survived custody hearings, divorce mediation, and a 7-year-old science fair project involving vinegar and far too much baking soda. Crisis management is crisis management." Natalie laughed, and it sounded genuine this time. "How did you get through it? The divorce, I mean. The part where someone you trusted completely turned out to be someone different than you thought?" He thought about Sarah. About coming home early from a conference and finding evidence of an affair that had apparently been going on for months. About the way their marriage had unraveled like a sweater with one pulled thread, fast, messy, impossible to repair. "I stopped trying to understand why," he said finally. "That was the hardest part. I kept thinking if I could just figure out what I'd missed, what I'd done wrong, I could make sense of it. But some people are just good at hiding who they really are. And eventually you have to accept that the version you loved might have been real to you, but it wasn't the whole truth." "Lucas gave the eulogy at my father's funeral," Natalie said quietly. "He talked about integrity and legacy and protecting what matters. And I believed him. I believed every word. That's not your failure. That's his. Doesn't feel that way right now." Daniel understood that too. The way betrayal made you doubt your own judgment, question every decision, wonder what else you'd been wrong about. "Tomorrow," he said, "you walk into that conference room and you show them the truth. Not your truth or Lucas's truth, but the actual, documented, provable truth. And whatever happens after that, you'll know you did the right thing. Even if doing the right thing costs me everything? Especially then, because your daughter's watching." He heard her sharp intake of breath. "Emma pays attention to everything I do, how I handle stress, how I treat people, whether I keep my promises. She's learning what integrity looks like by watching me live it or fail to live it every single day. Your father taught you something about truth and legacy. Whether you win or lose tomorrow, you're proving he was right." Natalie was crying now, quiet but unmistakable. "I really hate that you're making me feel feelings right now." "Yeah, well, I'm a dad. Inducing feelings is basically my superpower." He softened his voice. "You're going to be okay, Natalie. Not because everything will work out perfectly, but because you're strong enough to survive even if it doesn't." "How do you know?" "Because you're still here, still fighting. A weaker person would have run the second they saw those numbers on the beach." He checked his watch. "Now seriously, go eat something and sleep. I'll see you at 8 a.m. "Daniel?" "Yeah?" "I'm really glad you're terrible at minding your own business." He grinned. "Me too." After they hung up, Daniel sat in the quiet of his living room and wondered what the hell he'd gotten himself into. Tomorrow he'd walk into a corporate board meeting where billionaires and lawyers would battle over millions of dollars and company control. He was a financial analyst with a decent salary and a used Honda. He had no business being in that room, but he'd promised to show up, and Daniel Reed kept his promises. He set his alarm for 5:30, checked that Emma's lunch was prepped for school, and tried to sleep. His dreams were a confused tangle of spreadsheets and courtrooms and Natalie standing on a cliff edge, asking him if the numbers ever lied. The alarm felt like violence. Daniel stumbled through his morning routine on autopilot: shower, coffee, wake Emma, make breakfast, pack her lunch, help her find the homework she'd sworn was in her backpack but was actually under the couch. "Big day at work?" Emma asked through a mouthful of cereal. "Pretty big. You should wear your blue tie. It makes you look official." Daniel glanced down at his outfit, standard khakis and button-down. "Official's good?" "Official is very good. Madison's dad wears a tie to work, and he's a dentist, which means he's basically in charge of teeth. If you're in charge of numbers, you should definitely look official." 7-year-old logic was flawless. Daniel changed into his blue tie. The drive to Meridian Technologies felt surreal. He'd made this commute 1,000 times, but never at 7:15 a.m. on a Monday, with the intention of watching his CEO potentially lose everything. The building looked the same, sleek glass and steel, the company logo gleaming in the early light, but it felt different, hostile somehow. Security waved him through with barely a glance. The 4th floor was eerily quiet. Most people wouldn't arrive for another hour. The conference room door was closed. Daniel stood outside it, suddenly uncertain. What if Natalie had changed her mind? What if his presence made things worse? What if... The door opened. Natalie stood there in a navy suit that probably cost more than Daniel's car, her hair pulled back in a ruthless bun, her expression unreadable. She looked like a warrior preparing for battle. "You came," she said. "I said I would." She smiled, small but real. "Come on, let me introduce you to corporate combat." The conference room was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, a massive table that could seat 20, leather chairs that probably had price tags Daniel didn't want to imagine. Everything screamed power and money and consequence. 3 people were already present. An older woman with silver hair and glasses that looked expensive enough to have a retirement plan. A man in his 50s, South Asian, wearing a suit so perfectly tailored it might have been painted on. And Lucas Kane. Daniel recognized him from company photos and news articles. Late 60s, silver fox, attractive in that way wealthy men managed to be, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Natalie," Lucas said warmly, like they were old friends meeting for brunch. "Thank you for coming early. I thought we should talk before the others arrive." "I'm sure you did." Natalie's voice was ice. "Daniel Reed, meet Lucas Kane. Lucas, this is my senior financial analyst who discovered your little embezzlement scheme." The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Lucas's smile never wavered, but something predatory flickered behind it. "Mr. Reed, I've heard your name mentioned, though I'm surprised Natalie dragged an employee into what is clearly an internal board matter." "I volunteered," Daniel said evenly. "How noble." Lucas turned back to Natalie. "I assume you've seen this morning's news coverage. Quite the media circus you've created." "Interesting choice of words, considering you're the one who leaked doctored documents to the press on Saturday." "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Of course you don't." Natalie pulled out a chair and sat like she owned the room, which, technically, she did. "Just like you have no idea about Apex Solutions, Redline Consulting, or Vertex Innovations, those names ring any bells?" Something tightened in Lucas's expression, there and gone in a flash. "Shell companies aren't illegal, Natalie. They're common tax optimization tools. They are when you're using them to funnel Meridian's acquisition budget into your own accounts." The older woman, Daniel assumed she was another board member, cleared her throat. "Perhaps we should wait for legal counsel before—" "Susan, please." Lucas's voice carried just enough condescension to make it clear who he thought was in charge. Natalie's understandably upset. She's facing difficult questions about her management of the quantum acquisition, and she's lashing out. "We've all seen the financial reports. The acquisition is hemorrhaging money because of poor planning and worse execution." It's hemorrhaging money because you stole $15 million, Natalie said flatly. That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof? Daniel stepped forward and set his laptop on the table. Actually, yes, we have comprehensive proof. He opened the first file, the transaction records they'd compiled. Every payment to the shell companies, highlighted and cross-referenced. Lucas barely glanced at them. Vendor payments, he said dismissively. Perfectly legitimate business expenses. Paid to companies you own, companies incorporated specifically to receive these payments. Companies with no employees, no websites, no actual services rendered. Daniel pulled up the Delaware registrations. All three incorporated within a 2-month period, all using Kane Holdings as registered agent. Circumstantial. Is it? Natalie leaned forward. Because we also have emails showing you pressuring our CFO to restructure financial oversight. We have board minutes where you consistently block detailed financial reviews. You have paranoid conspiracy theories built on coincidence. Lucas stood, buttoning his suit jacket with casual authority. Richard quit because he couldn't handle the stress. The acquisition underperformed because you overpromised and underdelivered. And these payments? He gestured at Daniel's laptop. Tax optimization through legitimate corporate structures. Nothing illegal. Nothing wrong. The South Asian board member, whose nameplate read Rahul Singh, spoke for the first time. Lucas, if these companies are legitimate, you should have no trouble providing documentation of services rendered, contracts, invoices, work product. I don't have to prove my innocence to satisfy Natalie's witch hunt. Actually, Natalie said softly, you kind of do, because I've also compiled evidence that you threatened Richard's daughter to force his resignation. The room went silent. Lucas's mask slipped for just a second, showing something cold and calculating underneath. Then the charm snapped back into place. That's absurd. Richard's daughter lives in a building owned by Kane Properties Management, a building where the rent is suspiciously below market rate, which could be construed as an unreported benefit. And 3 days before Richard resigned, his daughter received a letter from building management threatening eviction due to lease violations she'd never committed. Daniel pulled up the documentation, property records, the threatening letter Richard's daughter had posted about on social media, timestamps showing it arrived right before Richard's sudden departure. You used his daughter as leverage, Natalie continued. You threatened to destroy her housing, expose the subsidized rent as taxable income, and probably a dozen other things unless Richard disappeared quietly. And he did, because protecting your child comes before everything else. She looked directly at Daniel when she said it, and he understood. This wasn't just about corporate fraud anymore. This was about the fundamental truth both of them lived by. You protect what matters, no matter the cost. Lucas was still smiling, but it looked strained now. You're constructing elaborate fantasies to avoid taking responsibility for your failures. The board can see that. Can they? Natalie stood. Then let's make this simple. You claim these payments are legitimate business expenses. Fine. Provide documentation proving what services these companies performed. Contracts, deliverables, communications, anything that shows actual work was done in exchange for $15 million. I don't have to prove anything to you. No, but you do have to prove it to them. She gestured to the other board members who were watching the exchange with increasing alarm. Because if you can't, then the only logical conclusion is that you created fake companies to steal from the business my father built. Lucas's expression hardened. Your father trusted me. My father also taught me that trust has to be earned every single day. You failed that test. I was protecting this company. You're reckless, Natalie. You take unnecessary risks, chase flashy acquisitions instead of focusing on sustainable growth. Someone had to create a safety net for when your gambles inevitably failed. By stealing? By ensuring resources weren't completely wasted on your vanity projects. Lucas's composure cracked fully now, anger bleeding through. The quantum acquisition was a mistake from the start. I tried to warn you, tried to slow you down, but you wouldn't listen. You never listen. Just like your father. Too proud, too stubborn, too convinced you're the smartest person in the room. Natalie smiled. Actually, I'm not the smartest person in the room. He is. She pointed at Daniel. Mr. Reed spent 12 hours doing what you clearly thought was impossible, tracking every dollar you stole. He found patterns you thought were invisible. He connected dots you thought would stay separate, and he did it because, unlike you, he actually cares about truth more than power. Lucas looked at Daniel with undisguised contempt. A junior analyst who got lucky. Impressive. Senior analyst, Daniel corrected mildly. And it wasn't luck, it was paying attention. The door opened. 3 more board members entered, along with 2 people Daniel assumed were lawyers based on their expressions of professional concern. The final board member was younger, early 40s, South Asian woman with an air of barely contained energy. "Sorry we're late," she said, glancing between Natalie and Lucas. "Traffic was... What's going on?" "Lucas has been stealing from the company," Natalie said simply. "We're about to vote on his immediate termination." The room erupted. For the next 90 minutes, Daniel watched corporate warfare unfold with the choreography of a particularly vicious ballet. Lawyers argued procedure. Board members demanded evidence. Lucas alternated between outraged denial and strategic deflection. But the numbers didn't care about performance. Daniel walked them through every transaction, every shell company, every connection. He showed them the timeline of payments starting right after the quantum acquisition was approved. He demonstrated how the amount stayed just under executive approval thresholds. He proved, with mathematical certainty, that Lucas Kane had stolen nearly $15 million. The younger board member, Priya Shah, according to her nameplate, was the first to break the silence after Daniel's presentation. "This is damning," she said quietly. "Lucas, if you have any explanation that contradicts this evidence, now's the time." Lucas sat very still. His lawyer whispered something in his ear, but he waved the man off. "I built this company," he said finally. "Before Natalie's father even had the idea, I was investing in tech startups, building networks, creating opportunities. I made Meridian possible. And this is how I'm repaid? Public humiliation based on circumstantial evidence assembled by some analyst with delusions of competence?" "The evidence isn't circumstantial," Rahul said. "It's comprehensive. You created shell companies. You paid yourself through those companies. You threatened an employee to hide your trail. Those are facts. Facts can be interpreted many ways." "Not these facts," Susan said. She'd been quiet through most of the presentation, but now her voice carried weight. "I've known you 30 years, Lucas. I've watched you build an empire. I trusted you." She removed her glasses, and her eyes were tired. "You betrayed all of us. But worse, you betrayed everything Natalie's father believed about you." That landed. Daniel saw it hit Lucas like a physical blow. "Motion to terminate Lucas Kane's position on the board, effective immediately," Priya said. "All in favor?" 5 hands went up. Lucas stood slowly. "This isn't over." "Yes," Natalie said. "It is. I have lawyers, resources, connections you can't imagine. You think exposing me ends this? I'll bury you in litigation. I'll make sure every investor knows you're unstable, vindictive, a liability. You'll leave," Natalie interrupted. "Security will escort you from the building. Your access to all Meridian systems has been revoked. Criminal charges will likely follow, but that's between you and the district attorney." She stood, and despite Lucas having 6 inches on her, she somehow seemed taller. "My father gave you everything. A chance when no one else would. Trust you never earned. And you repaid him by trying to destroy what we built together. So no, Lucas. You don't get to threaten me. You don't get to pretend you're the victim. You just get to leave." Security appeared at the door, 2 large men who looked very ready to remove Lucas physically if necessary. Lucas looked around the room one last time. "You'll regret this." "The only thing I regret," Natalie said, "is not seeing who you really were sooner." They watched him leave. The room stayed silent until the elevator doors closed behind him. Then Natalie sat down hard, like her legs had stopped working. "Are you okay?" Susan asked. "I have no idea." Natalie's hands were shaking. "Give me a minute." The board members quietly excused themselves, leaving Natalie and Daniel alone in the massive conference room. "We did it," she said to the windows. "You did it," Daniel corrected. "I just provided the math. The math that saved everything." She turned to face him. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to." "Daniel, seriously, you don't. He started packing his laptop. I'm going to head downstairs, do my actual job for a few hours, pick Emma up from school at 3. This was intense, but it's done now. Natalie stood. Wait. He paused. I don't want you working under me anymore. Daniel's stomach dropped. I'm sorry if I overstepped. No. She crossed the space between them. You didn't overstep. You went above and beyond in every possible way. But I can't have you reporting to me anymore because, she took a breath, because the boundaries are gone. They disappeared somewhere between the beach and the all-nighter and watching you dismantle Lucas's entire defense with spreadsheets. And I don't want to be your boss anymore. Daniel's brain struggled to process what she was saying. Then what do you want to be? Natalie kissed him. It wasn't tentative or questioning. It was certain, like she'd made a decision and was following through with characteristic intensity. Daniel froze for half a second, professional panic warring with something else entirely, and then kissed her back. When they finally broke apart, Natalie was smiling. I want to be that. That's... Daniel couldn't find words. That's complicated. Everything is complicated. We just took down a board member for corporate fraud. Complicated is our baseline now. I have a daughter. I know. And you're still technically my boss. Technically. But I'm planning to promote you to a position that reports directly to the board instead of me. Senior Vice President of Financial Oversight. Your own office, your own team, complete independence from my direct authority. Daniel stared at her. You're restructuring corporate hierarchy so you can date me. I'm restructuring corporate hierarchy so you can do the job you're clearly exceptional at without any appearance of impropriety. The dating is just a very pleasant side benefit. She touched his face. Unless you're not interested, in which case I've just made this spectacularly awkward. I'm interested, Daniel said. I'm also terrified. Good. We can be terrified together. Natalie's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and grimaced. I have 14 missed calls from our PR team and approximately 1 million media requests. I should probably handle that. And I should pick up my daughter from school and explain why Dad's face might be on the news tonight. They stood there, neither quite ready to leave the moment. Dinner? Natalie asked. This week sometime. Somewhere not a beach or a conference room. Somewhere with actual food and zero corporate fraud, Daniel agreed. I'll text you. He headed for the elevator, his mind spinning. He'd come to work expecting to witness a confrontation. Instead, he'd helped dismantle a conspiracy, earned a promotion he hadn't asked for, and apparently started dating his CEO. Former CEO. Sort of. This was definitely going to require another therapy session. His phone rang as he reached his car. Marcus, because of course it was. I saw the news, Marcus said without preamble. Lucas Kane escorted out by security. Board member terminated for fraud. Sources say it's connected to the expose from yesterday. Daniel, please tell me you're not somehow in the middle of this. Daniel unlocked his car and slid into the driver's seat. I'm in the middle of this. Of course you are, because why would you have a normal day at work like a reasonable person? It's resolved now. Crisis over. Everything's fine. Everything is not fine. You just made a very powerful enemy. Daniel thought about Lucas's parting threat, about lawyers and resources and connections. Maybe, he admitted, but I'd rather have powerful enemies than live with being too scared to do the right thing. Marcus sighed. You're going to give me a heart attack, you know that? Consider it payback for all the times you dragged me to bars when I had work in the morning. He drove to Emma's school with his brain still processing everything. The confrontation, the kiss, the fact that his life had somehow become exponentially more complicated in the space of 48 hours. But when Emma ran out of the school building, backpack bouncing, gap-toothed smile, bright as sunlight, everything else fell away. Dad, we had art class and I made you a picture of our family, but I accidentally made you too tall so you look like a giant. But Mrs. Chen said it's artistic interpretation, which means it's okay to be wrong if you meant to be wrong. Daniel laughed, helping her into the car. I love artistic interpretation. On the drive home, Emma chattered about her day while Daniel listened and responded and tried not to think about the media storm brewing around Meridian Technologies. Tried not to think about Lucas Kane's threats or Natalie's kiss or the fact that he'd just fundamentally altered the trajectory of his career. Tonight he'd make dinner, help with homework, read chapters about dragons. Tomorrow he'd figure out everything else. Because that's what Daniel Reed did. Showed up for what mattered and trusted himself to handle the rest. 6,389 words. The nightmare started 3 days later. Daniel was in his office, the same modest fourth-floor space he'd occupied for years, not the executive suite Natalie had mentioned, when his computer screen went black. Not the normal screensaver black. The wrong kind of black. The kind that made his spine straighten and his analyst instincts scream danger. Then text appeared, white letters stark against the void. "You made a mistake." Daniel stared at the message for 3 full seconds before his brain caught up to what he was seeing. This wasn't a system glitch. Someone had remote access to his computer. Someone was actively communicating through it right now. His hand moved toward the power button, but another line appeared before he could shut down. Touching that won't help. We're already in everything. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. "Check your email, personal account, the one you think is private." Daniel's blood went cold. He pulled out his phone with hands that wanted to shake and opened his personal email. The most recent message had no subject line, sent from an address that was just random letters and numbers. He clicked it. The email contained a single file attachment. Against every security instinct he'd ever developed, Daniel opened it. Photos filled his screen. Emma at school, laughing with friends during recess. Emma at soccer practice, mid-kick. Emma walking out of their house yesterday morning, backpack slung over one shoulder. The timestamps were from the last 72 hours. Someone had been watching his daughter. Daniel's vision tunneled. The office around him seemed to recede into white noise as rage and terror fought for dominance in his chest. His hands clenched around his phone hard enough that the case creaked in protest. Another message popped up on his computer screen. "Lucas Kane sends his regards. You took something from him. Now he's showing you what he can take from you." The screen went black again, then returned to normal desktop settings like nothing had happened. Daniel was already moving. He grabbed his keys, his phone, left his laptop open on the desk. His legs felt disconnected from his body as he half ran to the elevator, jabbing the button with enough force to hurt his finger. "Daniel!" Someone called his name, a coworker whose face he couldn't process right now. "You okay?" He didn't answer. The elevator took 10,000 years to arrive. When the doors finally opened, he stepped inside and immediately called Emma's school. "Canyon Elementary. This is Beth speaking." "This is Daniel Reed, Emma Reed's father. I need to confirm she's in class right now." His voice came out steady despite the hurricane in his chest. "Oh, Mr. Reed, let me check. Yes, she's in music class. Is everything all right? I need you to keep her in the main office until I arrive. Don't let her leave the building with anyone except me. Not her mother, not anyone on the pickup list. Only me. This is a safety issue." Beth's tone shifted to professional concern. "Mr. Reed, has something happened?" "Just please keep her safe. I'm 20 minutes away." He drove faster than he should have, his mind cycling through options. Call the police and tell them what? That someone sent him photos of his daughter? Technically not illegal if taken in public spaces. That his computer had been hacked? IT issue, not criminal unless he could prove intent. That Lucas Kane was threatening him? Based on what evidence? An anonymous email that could have come from anyone? Number. Calling the police would take time he didn't have and might make things worse if Lucas had connections in law enforcement. Daniel called Natalie instead. She answered on the first ring. "Hey, I was just about to text you about dinner options. Lucas is threatening Emma." Complete silence. Then, "Say that again." Daniel explained while running a red light he barely saw. The hacked computer, the photos, the message. By the time he finished, he was pulling into the school parking lot with enough speed to make his tires squeal. "I'm coming to you," Natalie said. Her voice had gone flat and dangerous. "Don't do anything until I get there. I'm getting my daughter and taking her somewhere safe. Daniel, listen to me. Lucas is trying to make you panic. If you run, if you pull Emma out of school and disappear, you'll look unstable. He'll use it against you in custody disputes, tell the courts you're paranoid and potentially dangerous. You need to stay calm and document everything." He was watching my daughter. Daniel's voice cracked. He sent me photos from this morning. Someone followed her to school, Natalie. Someone got close enough to photograph her on our front porch. I know, and we're going to destroy him for it. But first you need to breathe. Daniel realized he was sitting in his car in the school parking lot, gripping the steering wheel hard enough to leave marks. Parents walked past, heading inside for pickup. Everything looked aggressively normal. I can't breathe, he said. Not until I see her. Then go see her. Confirm she's safe. But Daniel, you can't tell her what's happening. She's 7. This will terrify her. He knew Natalie was right. Hated that she was right. What do I do? You act like everything is fine. You take her home, you make dinner, you do the bedtime routine, and tomorrow morning we meet with lawyers and law enforcement, and we bury Lucas Kane so deep he'll need archaeological equipment to find daylight. Daniel took a shaking breath. Okay. I'm serious about coming over. You shouldn't be alone with this tonight. I have Emma. I know, but after she goes to sleep, you're going to need someone who understands what Lucas is capable of. Someone who won't tell you it'll be fine when we both know it might not be. Natalie's voice softened. Let me help, please. Daniel closed his eyes. Come over at 8. She'll be asleep by then. Inside the school, Beth from the front office watched him with obvious concern as Emma appeared from the music room, confused about why Dad was picking her up early, but delighted nonetheless. Did I forget a dentist appointment? Emma asked, taking his hand. No, sweetheart. I just finished work early and thought we could get ice cream. Her face lit up. On a Wednesday? On a Wednesday. In the car, Emma chattered about music class and how Tommy had played the xylophone wrong, but Mrs. Anderson said there was no wrong way to make art, which Emma thought was a weird thing to say about music. Daniel responded on autopilot, his eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror for cars that might be following them. No one was. Probably. He couldn't tell anymore. They got ice cream at the shop 3 blocks from home. Emma ordered her usual, chocolate with rainbow sprinkles, and Daniel got coffee flavor he couldn't taste. They sat at the outdoor tables, and Daniel watched every person who walked past, cataloging faces, looking for threats. Dad, you're doing the faraway thing again, Emma observed. Daniel forced his attention back to her. Sorry, kiddo, just thinking about work stuff. Is it still important work? Very important. She considered this while working on her ice cream. Are you scared? The question caught him completely off guard. What makes you think I'm scared? You have your scared face on. It's different from your worried face. Your worried face is scrunchy, she demonstrated, wrinkling her nose. Your scared face is really quiet. 7 years old, and she could read him like a spreadsheet. Daniel set down his untouched ice cream and looked at his daughter, really looked at her. Gap-toothed smile slightly melted by chocolate ice cream. Eyes that were too perceptive by half. The most important thing in his entire world. Yeah, he admitted. I'm a little scared. Of what? Of making sure you're always safe. That's my job as your dad, and sometimes it feels really big. Emma reached across the table and patted his hand with sticky fingers. You're really good at your job, Dad. You always keep me safe. The trust in her voice nearly broke him. They finished ice cream and went home. Daniel checked every window lock twice, set the security system he rarely used, and kept his phone within arm's reach all evening. He made Emma's favorite dinner, mac and cheese from a box, the cheap kind she insisted tasted better than homemade. And they watched a movie about talking animals saving their forest. Through it all, Daniel's mind ran worst-case scenarios. Lucas had resources, connections. If he wanted to hurt Emma, to really hurt her, not just scare Daniel, there were a dozen ways he could make it happen. Hiring someone to grab her from school, fabricating evidence of abuse to trigger a custody investigation, manufacturing situations where Emma got hurt and Daniel looked negligent. Stop. He forced the spiral to halt. Natalie was right. Panic was what Lucas wanted. Panic made people sloppy. Daniel Reed didn't do sloppy. Bath time was normal. Story time was normal. Emma fell asleep clutching the stuffed dinosaur she'd had since she was 3, completely unaware that her father's world had tilted on its axis. Daniel stood in her doorway for a long time, watching her breathe. The doorbell rang at exactly 8 p.m. Natalie stood on his porch wearing jeans and a sweater that looked expensive but comfortable, holding a bag from a Thai restaurant and a bottle of wine that probably cost more than his weekly grocery budget. "I brought reinforcements," she said. "Food and alcohol. The traditional weapons against existential dread." Daniel let her in, suddenly aware of how small his house must seem compared to her cliffside rental or wherever she actually lived. The furniture was mismatched, acquired over years of necessity rather than design. Emma's artwork covered the fridge. A basket of unfolded laundry sat in the corner of the living room. Natalie didn't seem to notice or care. She set the food on his kitchen table and poured wine into the coffee mugs he provided since he didn't own actual wine glasses. "How's Emma?" she asked. "Asleep, oblivious. I'm trying to keep it that way." "Good." Natalie pulled out her phone. "I spent the afternoon calling in every favor I have. Corporate lawyers, criminal attorneys, a private investigator who specializes in this kind of harassment. They're all on standby." Daniel slumped into a chair. "I don't know if I can afford—" "You're not paying. Meridian is. Lucas threatened an employee in retaliation for exposing corporate fraud. That makes this a company liability issue." She met his eyes. "And even if it didn't, I'd pay. Because someone going after your daughter to get to me is unacceptable. He's not going after Emma to get to you. He's doing it to get to me." "Same thing," Natalie said simply. They ate Thai food that Daniel barely tasted while Natalie outlined the plan. First thing tomorrow, they'd file a police report about the harassment. Simultaneously, her lawyers would file for a restraining order against Lucas. The private investigator would start documenting everything: when the photos were taken, from what angles, whether Lucas had hired someone or done it himself. "The goal is to make him understand that touching Emma brings consequences worse than anything you did to him," Natalie explained. "We're going to make it so expensive, so legally complicated, and so publicly damaging that he backs off. And if he doesn't, then we escalate. Criminal charges, federal investigation. I will personally ensure that Lucas Kane spends the rest of his life fighting legal battles that drain every resource he has." Her voice was cold steel. "I've been playing nice because that's what CEOs do. But he went after a child, Daniel. There's no playing nice anymore." Daniel wanted to feel reassured. Instead, he just felt tired. "I should have seen this coming." "How? You're not psychic." "I'm supposed to see problems before they become catastrophes. That's literally my job. I look at numbers and predict outcomes." He gestured at nothing, everything. "I should have predicted this." Natalie reached across the table and grabbed his hand. "Listen to me. Lucas Kane is a sociopath with unlimited resources and a pathological need to win. You couldn't have predicted this because normal people don't think like he does. You did the right thing exposing him. What he's doing now, that's on him, not you." "Doesn't feel that way." "I know." She squeezed his hand. "But feeling responsible and being responsible are different things." They cleaned up dinner in silence. Daniel washed dishes while Natalie dried, and the domesticity of it felt surreal given the circumstances. Like they were a couple doing normal couple things, except one of them was a billionaire CEO, and the other was trying not to have a panic attack about threats to his daughter. "Can I ask you something?" Natalie said, putting away the last plate. "How do you do it? The single parent thing, the constant vigilance, never getting to be off duty." Daniel dried his hands, considering. "You just do. There's no alternative. Emma needs someone to show up every single day, so I show up. Some days I'm great at it. Some days I'm mediocre. But I'm always there." "Does she know? How hard you work to make it look easy?" "I hope not. That's the whole point." He leaned against the counter. "My dad died when I was 16. And the thing that scared me most wasn't losing him. It was watching my mom try to hold everything together while falling apart. I could see the cracks, the exhaustion, the fear. And I felt helpless because I was just a kid." He met Natalie's eyes. "I never want Emma to feel that way, so I work really hard to make sure she doesn't see the cracks." "Even when someone's threatening her?" "Especially then." Natalie was quiet for a long moment. "My father had a heart attack when I was 26, dropped dead in the middle of a board meeting. One second he was arguing about Q3 projections, the next he was gone." Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. "And the only thing I could think was that I'd wasted so much time being angry at him for working too much, for caring more about the company than about being home for dinner. And then he was gone, and I'd never get to tell him I understood. Did he know that you were angry? Probably. He was perceptive like that. She smiled sadly. He left me the company in his will. Everyone thought I'd sell it, cash out, live off the trust fund. Lucas was the only one who said publicly that I could do it, that I had my father's vision and his work ethic. And now you know why he said that. Because he wanted me to trust him enough to let him close. Natalie's hands clenched. He played a long game. Years of being supportive, being the loyal family friend, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when my CFO left, when I was vulnerable, he went for it. Daniel understood something then. You blame yourself for trusting him. I blame myself for not seeing it sooner. That's different from what I said. Natalie looked at him sharply. What? You don't regret trusting Lucas. You regret not catching him. Those aren't the same thing. Daniel moved to sit on the couch, and Natalie followed. Trust isn't a weakness. It's not something you should punish yourself for. Lucas exploited it, which makes him terrible. Not you, naive. I'm a CEO. I'm supposed to be suspicious. You're a human being. You're supposed to believe people when they show you who they are. Lucas showed you a loyal friend for years. How were you supposed to know it was a performance? Natalie sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. Is this what your therapist tells you? Some version of it, yeah. Usually with more technical terms and homework assignments. Does it help, the therapy? More than I expected. Daniel stared at his hands. After the divorce, I was a mess. Angry all the time, couldn't sleep, kept replaying every moment of my marriage looking for clues I'd missed. My lawyer finally said if I didn't get therapy, I'd lose custody because I was clearly unstable. He laughed without humor. Turns out, she was right. I was unstable. Still am, some days. But therapy gave me tools to function anyway. What kind of tools? Recognizing when I'm spiraling, breaking down problems into manageable pieces, understanding that I can't control everything, but I can control how I respond. He looked at Natalie, like right now. I can't control what Lucas does next, but I can control whether I let fear make me stupid. Is that what you're doing? Controlling your fear? I'm trying. Mostly I'm just really good at compartmentalizing. Daniel pulled out his phone and showed her his lock screen, the photo of Emma with her gap-toothed grin. This is what matters. Everything else is just logistics. Natalie studied the photo for a long moment. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. She's the only reason I didn't completely fall apart when Sarah left. Do you still love her, your ex-wife? The question should have felt intrusive, but Natalie asked it like she was genuinely trying to understand, not judge. No, Daniel said honestly. I don't think I do. I loved who I thought she was, but that person either never existed or stopped existing somewhere along the way. What I feel now is just sad. Sad that we couldn't make it work. Sad that Emma has to split her time between houses. Sad that I wasted years on someone who didn't want the same things I did. What did you want? Partnership. Someone who showed up. Someone who meant it when they made promises. He looked at Natalie. Simple things, really, just harder to find than they should be. Yeah, Natalie said quietly. They really are. They sat in silence that felt comfortable despite everything. Outside, Daniel could hear distant traffic, a dog barking, the normal sounds of suburban evening. Inside, the house was warm and safe and exactly as ordinary as he'd tried to make it for Emma. I should go, Natalie said eventually. Let you sleep. You could stay. The words came out before Daniel fully thought them through. Not like that. I just mean, you were right earlier, I shouldn't be alone with this tonight, and the couch is surprisingly comfortable. Natalie smiled. Are you offering me your couch? I'm offering you the option of not driving 30 minutes back to wherever you're staying while probably overthinking everything just as much as I will be. When you put it that way, how can I refuse? Daniel found spare pillows and a blanket that wasn't Emma's character-themed fleece. Natalie kicked off her shoes and settled into the couch like she'd done it 1,000 times. Thank you, she said, for letting me help. I know you're used to handling everything alone. I'm trying to get better at accepting help. My therapist says it's healthy interdependence or something. Your therapist sounds smart. She's amazing. Charges too much and doesn't take my insurance, but amazing. Daniel headed toward his bedroom, then paused. Natalie? Yeah? Whatever happens tomorrow, with the lawyers and the police and all of it, thank you for being here tonight. Nowhere else I'd rather be, she said, and sounded like she meant it. Daniel checked on Emma one more time, still sleeping, still safe, before collapsing into his own bed. He expected to lie awake for hours, running scenarios, planning contingencies. Instead, he fell asleep almost immediately, his subconscious apparently deciding that having Natalie Brooks on his couch was security enough. He woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Emma's delighted laughter. Daniel stumbled into the kitchen to find Natalie teaching his daughter how to make French toast while regaling her with a story about the time she'd accidentally set off the fire alarm in her college dorm trying to make the same dish. And then the entire building had to evacuate in their pajamas, Natalie was saying. It was February in Boston. I've never been so cold or so embarrassed. Emma giggled. Did you get in trouble? So much trouble. I had to write an apology letter to the fire department. Natalie looked up and saw Daniel. Good morning. I hope you don't mind. Emma found me on the couch and had questions. I told her you must be Dad's girlfriend, Emma announced proudly, because boys and girls who aren't related don't have sleepovers unless they're dating, Madison told me. Daniel's brain short-circuited. Emma, we're not, are we? Natalie asked, looking directly at him with an expression that was half amused, half serious. Daniel looked at his daughter, who was watching this exchange with great interest while flipping French toast. Can we talk about this later? That means yes, Emma said confidently. That's what Dad says when the answer is yes, but he thinks I'm too young to understand. Natalie burst out laughing. I like her. She's perceptive. Terrifyingly so, Daniel muttered, pouring himself coffee. Emma served French toast that was only slightly burned, and they ate breakfast like they were a family instead of a CEO, her employee, and his 7-year-old daughter navigating a situation none of them had planned for. After breakfast, Natalie's phone rang. She stepped onto the porch to take it while Daniel got Emma ready for school. Dad? Emma asked while brushing her teeth. Is Natalie nice? Very nice. Why? Because you look happy when she's here. Different happy than normal happy. Daniel had no idea how to respond to that, so he just helped her rinse her mouth and find her backpack. Natalie was still on the phone when they came out, but her expression had gone dark. She hung up as Daniel approached. That was my attorney, she said quietly, pitched so Emma wouldn't hear. Lucas filed a defamation lawsuit this morning. Against me, against you, against Meridian Technologies. He's claiming we fabricated evidence to destroy his reputation, and he's suing for $500 million. Daniel felt the ground shift beneath him. $500 million. It's a SLAPP suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation, designed to intimidate and drain resources, not to win. But it means this just got a lot more complicated, Daniel finished. Natalie nodded. My lawyers say we have strong grounds to get it dismissed, but it'll take time, months probably, and in the meantime, we're in a legal battle with a vengeful billionaire who's already proven he'll go after my daughter. Yes. Emma appeared at Daniel's side, backpack on, completely oblivious to the conversation happening over her head. Ready for school! Daniel looked at Natalie, then at Emma, then back at Natalie. The fear was still there, would probably always be there now, lurking in the background of every decision, but beneath it was something else, something that felt like determination. Okay, he said. Then we fight. Natalie's expression shifted from worried to fierce. Together? Daniel thought about every time he'd faced something impossible. The divorce, single parenthood, building a life from scratch when everything fell apart. He'd done all of it alone because he'd had to, because there was no other option. But maybe this time he didn't have to. Together, he agreed. Emma looked between them, clearly sensing something important was happening, even if she didn't understand what. Are we going to be late for school? No, sweetheart. We've got plenty of time. Daniel took her hand, then held his other hand out to Natalie. She took it without hesitation. They walked to the car like that, Emma chattering about the spelling test she'd forgotten to study for, Daniel listening with half his attention while the other half ran through contingency plans, and Natalie beside them both, solid and certain and refusing to let go. The fight was just beginning. Lucas Kane had resources and rage, and nothing left to lose. The legal battle would be brutal. The threat to Emma was real and ongoing and terrifying. But Daniel Reed had spent 8 years learning to function despite fear, had built a life out of showing up every day and doing the next right thing, even when everything else was falling apart. And for the first time since his divorce, he wasn't doing it alone. That had to count for something. It had to be enough. 6,447 words. The restraining order hearing happened in a courthouse that smelled like floor wax and institutional despair. Daniel sat in the gallery beside Natalie, watching lawyers argue about threat levels and reasonable fear while Emma was safely at school, unaware that her safety was being debated by strangers in expensive suits. Lucas's attorney was exactly what Daniel expected, silver-haired, supremely confident, speaking in the kind of measured tones that suggested he'd done this 1,000 times and won every single case. He painted Lucas as the victim of a malicious conspiracy, a respected businessman whose reputation had been destroyed by false accusations and manufactured evidence. "My client has never threatened anyone," the lawyer said smoothly. The photographs in question were taken in public spaces where no reasonable expectation of privacy exists. Mr. Reed received these images from an anonymous sender. There is zero evidence connecting Mr. Kane to their origin, until Natalie's lawyer, a woman named Jennifer Chen, who looked like she could argue circles around anyone in the room, stood with controlled fury radiating from every inch of her frame. "Your Honor, let's be clear about what happened here. Mr. Kane was terminated from Meridian Technologies' board after irrefutable evidence proved he embezzled nearly $15 million. Within 72 hours of his termination, Mr. Reed's personal computer was hacked with a message explicitly stating Lucas Kane sends his regards. That same day, Mr. Reed received photographs of his 7-year-old daughter taken without consent, accompanied by threatening language. The timing alone establishes clear connection and intent. The judge, a woman in her 60s with the expression of someone who'd heard every excuse humanity could invent, looked over her reading glasses at Lucas, who sat perfectly still beside his attorney, the picture of wounded dignity. "Mr. Kane, did you send those photographs?" "Absolutely not, Your Honor." Lucas's voice carried just the right amount of offense. "I'm devastated that Mr. Reed's daughter was photographed, but I had nothing to do with it. This is clearly an attempt to prejudice these proceedings and distract from the defamation lawsuit I've filed." "The defamation suit that's designed to intimidate witnesses and silence victims," Jennifer shot back. "Classic slap behavior from someone who knows he's guilty." "Ms. Chen," the judge said mildly, "let's keep our commentary focused on the restraining order application." "Of course, Your Honor, but the pattern is relevant. Mr. Kane has demonstrated a willingness to retaliate against those who expose his crimes. He forced out Meridian's CFO through threats to the man's daughter. Now he's targeting another employee's child. This is who he is." Lucas's lawyer objected. The judge sustained. The legal ballet continued for another 40 minutes. Arguments about burden of proof and standards of evidence and whether anonymous threats constituted credible danger. Daniel sat through it all, feeling like he was watching his life become a procedural drama. Every time someone said Emma's name, his chest tightened. Every time Lucas's lawyer suggested Daniel was being paranoid or vindictive, rage bubbled up that he had to forcibly suppress. Natalie's hand found his under the gallery bench, squeezed once, held on. Finally, the judge removed her glasses and looked directly at Lucas. "Mr. Kane, I'm troubled by the timing of events. Coincidences happen, but this strains credibility. However, without direct evidence linking you to the photographs or the computer breach, I cannot issue a restraining order based solely on temporal proximity and circumstantial inference." Daniel's stomach dropped. "That said," the judge continued, "I am issuing a warning. If any further incidents occur, if Mr. Reed or his daughter experience any additional harassment, surveillance, or threatening behavior, I will revisit this matter with extreme prejudice. Do you understand?" Lucas stood. "Completely, Your Honor. And may I say, I hope Mr. Reed's daughter remains safe. No child should be frightened by the actions of unstable individuals." The implication was clear. Lucas was suggesting someone else was responsible, possibly even Daniel himself, for attention or sympathy. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. Outside the courthouse, Natalie pulled him aside before he could say something he'd regret. "I know," she said. "I know that was complete bullshit, but we knew it might go this way." He stood there and lied in front of a judge, and she believed him. She didn't believe him. She just couldn't prove he was lying, which is different. Jennifer joined them, looking frustrated but not defeated. "The bar for restraining orders is high, but we got the warning on record, which means if anything else happens, we have grounds for immediate action." "And in the meantime," Daniel asked, "while we wait for Lucas to make his next move?" "In the meantime, you take precautions." Jennifer pulled out a business card. "This is for a security consultant I trust, former FBI. He'll assess your home, recommend upgrades, potentially provide personal protection if needed." Daniel looked at the card. "I can't afford—" "Meridian's paying," Natalie said firmly. "This is company-funded protection for an employee facing retaliation, non-negotiable. Lucas's defamation suit is garbage and will be dismissed. My legal team is already preparing the motion." Jennifer checked her watch. "I have to get to another hearing, but I'll call you both tonight with updates. Daniel, please contact that security consultant today. Don't wait." After she left, Daniel and Natalie stood on the courthouse steps watching lawyers and criminals and ordinary people navigate the machinery of justice. "I should get back to work," Daniel said. "Emma has soccer practice at 4. I need to figure out carpools and dinner and how to act like everything's normal." "Come to my place tonight instead." Natalie's voice was quiet but firm. "After Emma goes to sleep. We need to talk about what happens next." "What happens next is I wait for Lucas to do something else terrible and hope I can protect my daughter from it." "That's not a plan. That's just fear." Natalie turned to face him fully. "Daniel, I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But we can't just wait for the next attack. We need to go on offense." "How?" "The judge basically said we can't prove he's behind this." "We can't prove it in court yet, but there are other ways to fight." Her eyes held something dangerous and determined. "Lucas thinks he can intimidate us into silence. We're going to show him exactly how wrong he is." Something in her tone made Daniel pause. "What are you planning?" "Come over tonight and find out." She left him standing there, caught between fear for his daughter and curiosity about what Natalie had in mind. The rest of the day crawled by. Daniel went through the motions at work, spreadsheets, analysis, meetings, while his brain ran constant threat assessments. The security consultant called and scheduled a home visit for tomorrow. Marcus texted asking if Daniel had lost his mind getting involved with both corporate fraud and the CEO. His ex-wife called, having somehow heard about legal troubles, demanding to know if Emma was safe. "She's fine," Daniel said, keeping his voice level despite wanting to scream. "There's a situation at work, but it doesn't affect her." "What kind of situation?" "The confidential kind that I can't discuss. Emma is safe, Sarah. That's all you need to know." "I'm her mother. I need to know everything that affects her." "You're her mother when it's convenient," Daniel snapped. The words were out before he could stop them. "You forgot her last birthday. You've canceled the last 4 weekends. You don't get to pretend you're suddenly concerned about her safety." Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "We're not doing this right now." "No, we're not. But if you're genuinely worried about Emma, maybe show up consistently for once." He hung up before she could respond, immediately felt guilty, and then decided he didn't care. His therapist would have thoughts about that interaction. He'd deal with them next session. Emma's soccer practice was blessedly normal. She scored twice in the scrimmage and came off the field glowing with pride and grass stains. On the drive home, she talked nonstop about how Coach Mike said she had good instincts, and Madison's mom brought orange slices that were the good kind, not the cheap kind. Daniel made spaghetti for dinner while Emma did homework at the kitchen table. They watched an episode of her favorite show about dragons. He read 2 chapters of their current book. Everything was routine and safe and exactly what Emma needed. After she fell asleep, Daniel stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching her breathe, before heading to his car. Natalie's actual house, not the beach rental, was in the hills overlooking the city. The kind of neighborhood where houses had names instead of numbers and security gates were standard. Daniel gave his name to an intercom and drove up a winding driveway to a modern masterpiece of glass and steel that probably cost more than he'd make in 10 lifetimes. Natalie answered the door in jeans and an MIT sweatshirt, barefoot, looking more relaxed than he'd seen her since the beach. "Welcome to my actual home," she said. "Fair warning, it's aggressively expensive and vaguely ridiculous. My father bought it during the first tech boom, and I can't bring myself to sell it." The interior was all clean lines and open spaces, but unlike the beach rental, this place felt lived in. Books stacked on tables, a coffee mug sitting on the kitchen counter, photographs on the walls. Natalie with an older man who had to be her father, both of them laughing at something off camera. "He looks like you," Daniel observed. "I look like him. Same stubborn chin, same inability to leave work at the office." She moved to the kitchen. "Wine? Coffee? Something stronger?" "Coffee. I'm driving home." "Or you could stay." She said it casually, but there was a question underneath. "Emma's at home with a sitter. I need to—" "I know, but eventually you're going to have to trust that Emma is safe for one night, so you can take care of yourself." Natalie poured coffee into actual mugs, not the random collection Daniel had at home. "Your security consultant is installing cameras and better locks tomorrow, right? First thing in the morning. And you have a sitter you trust?" "Madison's mom. She's former military and has 3 kids of her own. Emma loves her." "Then Emma is safe tonight, and you are allowed to be here." Natalie handed him coffee. "Now come look at what I've been working on." She led him to a home office that looked like mission control. 3 monitors, documents spread across a massive desk, whiteboards covered in diagrams and timelines. "What is this?" Daniel asked. "This is how we destroy Lucas Kane." Natalie pulled up files on the center monitor. "I spent the day digging deeper into his financial history. The shell companies were just the start. Lucas has been running schemes for years: tax evasion, insider trading, fraud across multiple businesses. He's good at hiding it, but he's not perfect." Daniel studied the documents. "This is beyond embezzlement. Way beyond. Lucas isn't just a thief. He's built an entire empire on fraud. And if we can prove it, if we can show the SEC and the FBI exactly what he's been doing, he won't have time to threaten anyone. He'll be too busy trying to avoid federal prison. You want to build a criminal case against him. I want to bury him so completely that he becomes a cautionary tale." Natalie's voice was cold fire. "He went after a child, Daniel. Your child. There is no scenario where I let that stand." Daniel looked at the evidence she'd compiled. Years of financial records, suspicious transactions, patterns that screamed guilt to anyone who knew how to read them. It was comprehensive, damning, and probably enough to trigger multiple federal investigations. "This could take months to investigate," he said. "I know. But in the meantime, the threat of it will keep Lucas occupied. Right now he thinks he's won because the restraining order was denied. He thinks he scared us. We're going to show him that scaring us was the worst mistake he could have made." Daniel set down his coffee. "If we do this, if we go after him this hard, he'll retaliate. He'll come at us with everything he has." "Yes. He might go after Emma again, might escalate beyond photographs. That's why you're installing security, why we're documenting everything, why we're building a case so solid that the first time he makes a real move against your daughter, we have him arrested immediately." Natalie moved closer. "I won't let him hurt her, Daniel. I swear to you, I will burn every resource I have before I let that happen." "Why?" The question came out raw. "Why are you doing this? You could just fire me, distance yourself from the whole situation, let me deal with Lucas alone. It would be safer for you." Natalie looked at him like he'd said something incomprehensible. "You really don't know?" "Know what?" "Why I kissed you in the conference room. Why I've been at your house making French toast and holding your hand in courtrooms." She stepped close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her gray-green eyes. "I'm not helping you because you're an employee or because it's the right thing to do. I'm helping you because somewhere between the beach and the all-nighters and watching you dismantle corporate fraud with spreadsheets, I fell for you." Daniel's brain stuttered. "You what?" fell for you, developed feelings, started caring about you in ways that have nothing to do with professional obligation. She smiled, a little self-conscious. I'm told this is how normal relationships develop, though I wouldn't know since I've been married to my company for 15 years. Natalie, I know the timing is terrible. I know we're in the middle of legal warfare, and you're dealing with threats to your daughter, and this is possibly the worst moment in history to admit feelings. But you asked why I'm doing this, and that's why. Because I care about you, about Emma, about the life you've built, and I'm not going to stand by while Lucas destroys it. Daniel kissed her. No thought, no planning, just the sudden, overwhelming need to close the distance between them. When they broke apart, Natalie was smiling. So I'm guessing you have feelings too? Terrifying ones, Daniel admitted. I haven't felt this way about someone since before my marriage imploded. And even then, it wasn't like this. Like what? Like I can breathe around you, like I don't have to perform being okay when I'm not. Like you see all the messy, complicated parts of my life and you're still here. He cupped her face. I'm a single dad with an evil ex-wife, a 7-year-old who asks uncomfortable questions, and a billionaire actively trying to destroy my life. I come with more baggage than a 747. I'm a workaholic CEO with trust issues, a company to run, and a pathological need to win every battle I'm in. I'd say we're evenly matched. Natalie kissed him again, slower this time. Stay tonight, please. I know you need to be there when Emma wakes up, but stay until then. Let someone take care of you for once. Daniel thought about all the reasons he should say no. The optics, the complications, the fact that Emma would definitely have questions if he wasn't home in the morning. Then he thought about how tired he was, how long he'd been doing everything alone, how Natalie was looking at him like he mattered in ways that had nothing to do with work or obligation. Okay, he said, I'll stay. They moved to her living room, to a couch that was probably worth more than his car, but felt comfortable in ways his own furniture didn't. Natalie leaned against him and Daniel wrapped an arm around her, and for a few hours they just existed together without crisis or threat or fear. Natalie fell asleep first, her breathing evening out against his chest. Daniel stayed awake longer, his mind unable to fully quiet despite exhaustion. He thought about Emma, safe at home with the sitter, about Lucas, probably plotting his next move, about the federal case Natalie wanted to build, and whether it would be enough. His phone buzzed. A text from the sitter. Emma's asleep. All good here. Stay as long as you need. Bless Madison's mom and her apparent psychic abilities. Daniel's next text was from Marcus. Saw the news about the restraining order. You holding up? He typed back, define holding up. Still breathing? Not actively on fire? Then yes, good enough. Call if you need anything. I mean it. Daniel smiled. Marcus had been his friend since college, had helped him move out of the house he'd shared with Sarah, had shown up with pizza and beer, and absolutely zero judgment when Daniel's life fell apart. Having him in his corner mattered more than he usually acknowledged. The third text was from an unknown number. This isn't over. Daniel's blood went cold. He sat up carefully, trying not to wake Natalie, and stared at the message. Another text came through. You think you won? You didn't win anything. You just made it worse. Then a photo. Emma's school, taken from across the street, time-stamped from today. Daniel was on his feet instantly, his heart trying to break through his ribs. Natalie woke. What's wrong? He showed her the messages without speaking. Her expression went from sleepy to furious in half a second. Call Jennifer, now. And the police. This is direct threat with photographic evidence. Daniel was already dialing 911, his hand shaking so badly he almost dropped the phone. He reported the texts, the photos, gave them Lucas's name and the case number from the restraining order hearing. Officers are being dispatched to your home address to check on your daughter, the operator said. Stay on the line. The next 10 minutes were the longest of Daniel's life. Natalie was on her phone with Jennifer, explaining the situation in clipped professional tones while pacing her living room. Daniel stayed on with 911, answering questions, providing information, trying not to imagine worst-case scenarios. Finally, officers are at your home. Your daughter is safe and asleep. The babysitter confirmed no unusual activity. Daniel nearly collapsed with relief. Thank you. Thank you so much. He hung up and immediately called the sitter. Daniel, I'm so sorry, she said before he could speak. The police just left. They said Emma's fine, but they wanted to check all the windows and doors. I didn't want to wake her. You did everything right. Is she still sleeping? Yes, completely unaware anything happened. Okay, I'm coming home right now. He turned to Natalie. I have to… I know. Go. She was already grabbing her keys. I'm following you. You're not dealing with this alone. They drove in separate cars through empty streets, Daniel's mind racing faster than his speedometer. Someone had photographed Emma's school today, had been close enough to take a clear picture, had waited until tonight to send it, maximizing fear and impact. Lucas was escalating, exactly what Natalie had predicted. At home, Madison's mom met him at the door. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I had no idea. Not your fault. Did the officers say anything else? Just that they'd file a report and someone from the detective division would contact you tomorrow. She gathered her things. I can stay if you want. Extra eyes. No, you've done more than enough. Thank you. After she left, Daniel checked every room, every window, every lock. Natalie helped, moving through his house with the same methodical attention he was applying. Finally, they ended up in Emma's doorway, watching her sleep through the chaos she knew nothing about. We're filing for an emergency restraining order first thing tomorrow, Natalie said quietly. With these texts, we have direct evidence. No judge can ignore this. What if they do? What if Lucas keeps doing this and the system keeps failing to stop him? Then we take him down another way. She turned to look at Daniel. I meant what I said earlier. I will protect Emma, whatever it takes. Daniel wanted to argue that she didn't have to, that this wasn't her responsibility, that he should be able to handle this himself. But he was too tired and too scared and too grateful she was there. Thank you, he said instead. They sat in his living room until dawn started creeping through the windows. Natalie made coffee at some point. Daniel checked his phone obsessively for more texts. They talked through scenarios and strategies and contingency plans. When Emma woke up, she found them both in the kitchen making pancakes. Natalie's here again? She was delighted. Does this mean you're really dating now? Yes, Natalie said before Daniel could deflect. We're really dating. Is that okay with you? Emma considered this while climbing into her chair. Will you come to my soccer games? If your dad invites me, absolutely. And can you teach me more about business stuff? Because Dad's good at numbers, but he doesn't know anything about being a boss. Natalie laughed. Deal. I'll teach you about being a boss, and you can teach me about 7-year-old wisdom. What's wisdom? Being smart about important things. Oh, I'm very smart about important things. Emma dug into her pancakes with enthusiasm. Daniel watched them interact, his daughter and this woman who'd somehow become essential in the space of 2 weeks, and felt something shift in his chest. Not just fear anymore, not just exhaustion or determination. Hope. The security consultant arrived at 9 a.m. and spent 3 hours turning Daniel's modest house into a fortress. Cameras on every entrance, reinforced locks, motion sensors, a panic button connected directly to the security company and local police. This is extensive, Daniel said, watching the installation. Extensive is what you need, the consultant, a former FBI agent named Maria Rodriguez, replied. Whoever's targeting you is sophisticated and motivated. We're matching that level of threat. By noon, his house looked the same, but felt different. Safer. Protected. Jennifer called with an update. The emergency restraining order hearing was scheduled for tomorrow morning. With the threatening texts and new photos, she was confident they'd win this time. Lucas made a mistake, she said. He got cocky, thought he could keep terrorizing you without consequences. Tomorrow we prove him wrong. That night, after Emma was in bed and the new security system was armed, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with his laptop in a determination that felt like armor. He opened the files Natalie had compiled on Lucas's financial crimes, started building timelines, cross-referencing transactions, preparing documentation that could be handed to federal investigators. If Lucas wanted war, Daniel would give him war. But not the kind Lucas expected. Not threats or violence or retaliation that could hurt innocent people. Daniel would do what he did best, follow the numbers, build the case, Prove the truth so thoroughly that no amount of lawyers or money or connections could protect Lucas from consequences. His phone buzzed. Natalie, how are you holding up? Daniel typed back, preparing to destroy a billionaire with spreadsheets. The usual. That's my guy. Need help? Always. Be there in 20 minutes. She arrived with her laptop and a bag of takeout, and they worked side by side at Daniel's kitchen table like it was the most natural thing in the world, building the case, documenting everything, preparing for tomorrow's hearing and the battle beyond it. Somewhere out there, Lucas Kane was probably planning his next move. Probably thought he'd won by terrorizing them. He had no idea what was coming. Because Daniel Reed had spent 8 years learning that the best revenge wasn't anger or retaliation. It was showing up every single day and refusing to be destroyed. And now he had Natalie beside him. Emma safe upstairs. A security system that actually worked. And evidence that could bring down an empire. Lucas thought he was fighting a scared single father and a vulnerable CEO. He was wrong. He was fighting a partnership built on truth, desperation, and the kind of determination that came from protecting what mattered most. In that kind of fight, Lucas Kane was about to learn he couldn't win. The emergency restraining order hearing happened in the same courthouse, but this time everything felt different. Daniel walked in with Natalie beside him, Jennifer Chen armed with documented evidence, and the kind of cold clarity that came from being pushed too far. Lucas sat across the aisle looking less composed than before. Good. He should be nervous. The judge, a different one this time, a man in his 50s with the weathered expression of someone who'd seen humanity's worst, reviewed the case file in silence before looking up. Mr. Kane, it appears we have new evidence since your last appearance before this court. Threatening text messages sent to Mr. Reed's personal phone, accompanied by photographs of his daughter's school taken without authorization. The messages explicitly reference ongoing harassment and contain implied threats to continue. The judge's tone was flat, professional, damning. Do you have an explanation? Lucas's attorney stood. Your Honor, my client denies sending those messages. Anyone could have sent them using spoofing technology or anonymous messaging services. There's no proof. The messages were sent from a phone registered to a shell corporation owned by Kane Holdings. Jennifer interrupted, standing with a file in hand. We subpoenaed phone records overnight. The device that sent those texts is registered to Apex Solutions, one of the same shell companies Mr. Kane used to embezzle from Meridian Technologies. The connection is direct and irrefutable. The courtroom went silent. Lucas's face didn't change, but Daniel saw it. A flicker of something behind his eyes. Not quite fear. More like the recognition that he'd miscalculated. Your Honor, those records are privileged, Lucas's attorney tried. These are phone records obtained through proper legal channels in response to credible threats against a minor child, the judge said coldly. There's nothing privileged about evidence of criminal harassment. Ms. Chen, I assume you have documentation? Jennifer approached the bench and handed over the file. The judge reviewed it with the kind of focused attention that suggested he was reading every single word. Daniel felt Natalie's hand find his under the table. He squeezed back, not looking at her, keeping his eyes on the judge. Finally, the judge set down the papers. Mr. Kane, I'm granting the emergency restraining order. You are prohibited from any contact, direct or indirect, with Daniel Reed or his daughter Emma. You may not approach within 500 feet of their home, her school, or any location where they are present. You may not contact them through any means, phone, email, text, or third parties, acting on your behalf. Violation will result in immediate arrest and criminal charges. He paused. Furthermore, I'm forwarding this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution. Harassing a minor child is not something this court takes lightly. Lucas stood, and for the first time since Daniel had met him, the mask fully cracked. Your Honor, this is absurd. I'm being railroaded by false accusations from people who destroyed my reputation. Mr. Kane, you destroyed your own reputation when you chose to embezzle millions and threaten children. Sit down. The judge's voice cut like a blade. This hearing is concluded. Bailiff, please ensure Mr. Kane receives a copy of the restraining order before he leaves. Outside the courthouse, Daniel breathed air that tasted like victory and relief mixed together. We won, he said, still processing. We won this round, Jennifer corrected. Lucas can still appeal, and the defamation suit is ongoing. But this is major. The DA involvement means criminal charges are likely. That changes everything. How long until we know about the charges? Days? Maybe a week? But in the meantime, he can't touch you or Emma without facing arrest. Jennifer's smile was sharp. And I'd bet money he's too smart to risk that. Natalie was on her phone, pacing a few feet away. She finished her call and returned looking satisfied in a way that made Daniel slightly nervous. "What did you do?" he asked. "I called the SEC, sent them everything we compiled on Lucas's financial crimes, also contacted the FBI's white-collar crime division." She said it like she was discussing the weather. "I figured while we had his attention on the restraining order, we might as well open every other front available." Daniel stared at her. "You just casually called federal agencies?" "I have connections. And Lucas has been committing federal crimes for years. Someone should probably look into that." Her expression was innocent, but her eyes sparkled with something fierce. "What? You thought I was joking about burying him?" Jennifer laughed. "I like her. Daniel, you should definitely keep her." "I'm planning on it," Daniel said, and meant it. The next week unfolded like dominoes falling in slow motion. The DA's office announced they were investigating Lucas Kane for criminal harassment and cyberstalking. The SEC opened a formal inquiry into his business practices. The FBI seized records from 3 of his shell companies. Lucas's defamation lawsuit quietly disappeared, withdrawn without explanation, probably because his lawyers realized that discovery would expose every crime he'd committed in the last decade. Daniel went back to work. His new position as Senior VP of Financial Oversight came with an office that had actual windows and a team of analysts who looked at him like he'd personally defeated corporate evil, which, technically, he had. Emma remained blissfully unaware of most of the drama. She knew Dad had work stuff that was stressful, and she knew Natalie was around a lot more, and that was enough for her 7-year-old understanding of the world. "Is Natalie coming to my soccer game Saturday?" Emma asked one evening over dinner. "If you want her to," Daniel said carefully. "But you know she's very busy running her company, right? She might not always be able to make it to everything." Emma considered this seriously. "That's okay. You're busy too, and you always come. Natalie can come when she can come." She returned to her spaghetti, then looked up again. "Do you love her?" Daniel nearly choked on his water. "That's a pretty big question, Em. Madison says when grown-ups date for a while, they either love each other or break up. You've been dating for weeks now. So which is it?" 7-year-old logic was still flawless and terrifying. "I care about her a lot," Daniel said carefully. "Love is complicated." "Why?" "Because it means different things to different people, and it's important to be sure before you say it." Emma nodded like this made perfect sense. "But you smile different when she's here. Like you're happy in your whole face, not just your mouth." Daniel had no response to that except to hug his daughter and wonder when she'd become so perceptive about things he was still figuring out himself. That Saturday, Natalie showed up to Emma's soccer game wearing jeans and a Meridian Technologies t-shirt, carrying coffee for Daniel and orange slices for the team. She cheered when Emma scored, groaned when she missed, and generally behaved like she'd been attending elementary school soccer games her entire life. Afterward, Emma ran over covered in grass stains in triumph. "Did you see? I got 2 goals." "I saw," Natalie said, high-fiving her. "You were amazing." "Dad says you're very busy, but you came anyway. Thank you for coming." Something soft crossed Natalie's face. "Emma, I will always come when I can. I promise." Daniel watched them together, his daughter and this woman who'd become essential, and felt Emma's earlier observation click into place. He was happy, in his whole face, in ways he hadn't been since before his marriage imploded. Later that night, after Emma was asleep and Natalie was curled beside him on the couch, Daniel said what he'd been thinking all day. "Emma asked if I love you." Natalie went very still. "What did you tell her?" "That love is complicated, that I needed to be sure." He turned to face her. "But the truth is, I am sure. I've been sure since you showed up at my house with Thai food and refused to let me deal with Lucas alone. I'm just terrified of screwing this up." Why would you screw it up? Because I'm really good at screwing up relationships. My marriage failed. I couldn't make it work with someone I'd known for years. What makes you think I can make it work with someone I've known for weeks? Natalie sat up, and her expression was serious but not angry. First, your marriage failed because your wife had an affair, which is on her, not you. Second, length of time knowing someone doesn't determine compatibility. My parents knew each other 3 weeks before they got married, and they were happy until he died. Third, and most importantly, you're not screwing anything up. You're just scared, which is completely reasonable given that your last relationship ended in betrayal and you're now responsible for a child who depends on your choices being good ones. Daniel stared at her. Did you just therapize me? I just gave you a logical breakdown of your fears. If that sounds like therapy, maybe your therapist is onto something. She took his hands. Daniel, I'm scared too. I've never done this before. Dated someone, cared about someone, had to consider what another person needs. My entire adult life has been about the company. But then you walked into my life by accident at a beach, and suddenly everything shifted. And yes, it's terrifying. But it's also the best thing that's happened to me in years. Even with Lucas trying to destroy us, especially with that. Because it showed me who you are when everything goes wrong. You don't run, you don't panic, you show up and you solve problems and you protect what matters. She leaned closer. That's who I want in my life. Someone who shows up. I love you, Daniel said. The words came out simpler than he expected. I'm still terrified and I have no idea how we make this work long-term with your schedule and my custody arrangement and Emma needing stability, but I love you. Natalie kissed him. I love you too, and we'll figure out the logistics because that's what we do. We solve problems. Together. The word together settled into Daniel's chest like something he'd been missing without knowing it. 3 weeks later, the DA's office formally charged Lucas Kane with cyberstalking, harassment of a minor, and criminal conspiracy. The SEC expanded their investigation to include insider trading and securities fraud. The FBI added wire fraud and money laundering to the list. Lucas's empire began to crumble in real time. Business partners distanced themselves. Board positions disappeared. Assets were frozen pending investigation. Daniel followed it all with the same methodical attention he'd given to uncovering the fraud in the first place. Not with glee. He wasn't the kind of person who enjoyed destruction, even of someone who deserved it, but with satisfaction that justice was actually functioning. He's going to prison, Jennifer confirmed during a call. Multiple federal charges, overwhelming evidence, no sympathetic jury in the world. He's looking at minimum 15 years, possibly 25 with the aggravating factors. Good, Daniel said simply. How are you doing? Really? Daniel thought about it. Emma was thriving. Her grades were good. Soccer was going well. She'd recently informed him that Natalie was probably the coolest grown-up besides you, Dad. His job was challenging in the best way. The security system made him feel safe. Natalie was in his life in ways that felt sustainable and real. I'm okay, he said, and meant it. Better than okay, actually. You sound surprised. I am. I spent 2 years after my divorce just surviving. And now I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm actually living. That's good, Daniel. You deserve that. After hanging up, Daniel sat in his new office, the one with windows that overlooked the city, and allowed himself a moment of reflection. A month ago, he'd been a divorced single dad with a routine life and a job he was good at but not passionate about. Now he was in love with his CEO, had helped take down a criminal billionaire, and was building a life that felt bigger and better than anything he'd imagined. It was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. His phone buzzed. Natalie. Dinner tonight? My place. I'm cooking. Daniel. You cook? Natalie. I'm learning. It might be terrible. Come anyway. Daniel. Always. That night, Natalie's cooking was indeed terrible. Pasta that was somehow both undercooked and burnt, sauce from a jar she'd tried to enhance with ingredients that didn't enhance anything, but they ate it anyway, laughing about culinary disasters and making plans for the future. I want you to meet my mother, Natalie said suddenly. Daniel paused mid-bite. Your mother? She lives in Boston. Retired professor, very opinionated, We'll definitely interrogate you about your intentions toward her daughter. Natalie smiled. But she's important to me, and you're important to me. So I want her to meet you. And Emma, if you're comfortable with that, you want my 7-year-old to meet your mother. I want your daughter to know that this is serious, that I'm not going anywhere, that she can count on me being around. Natalie's voice was steady. Unless that's too fast, in which case we can wait. Daniel thought about Emma's question, about love and certainty, and the risk of moving forward with someone when you couldn't guarantee it would work. Then he thought about how Natalie showed up, always, for soccer games and late-night strategy sessions and terrible pasta dinners, how she'd fought for Emma's safety like Emma was her own daughter, how she made Daniel laugh and think and feel like he wasn't doing everything alone anymore. It's not too fast, he said. Let's do it. They flew to Boston 2 weeks later, Daniel, Emma, and Natalie on a weekend when Emma didn't have school and Natalie could take time away from Meridian. Emma was vibrating with excitement about her first plane ride, asking 1,000 questions about everything from turbulence to why the sky looked different from up high. Natalie's mother lived in a brownstone near Harvard, surrounded by books and cats and the kind of academic clutter that suggested a mind too busy for organization. She was in her 70s, sharp-eyed and silver-haired, and she studied Daniel with the intensity of someone conducting a peer review. "So you're the analyst who saved my daughter's company," she said. "I helped expose the fraud," Daniel corrected. "Natalie saved her own company." "Diplomatic. Good quality." She turned to Emma. "And you must be Emma. I hear you're excellent at soccer and want to be either an astronaut or a dinosaur expert." Emma nodded seriously. "I haven't decided yet. There's a lot to consider." "Very wise. Would you like to see my fossil collection? I have a trilobite that's 400 million years old." Emma's eyes went huge. "Yes, please." They disappeared into another room, leaving Daniel and Natalie alone with her mother. "She's lovely," Mrs. Brooks said. "Your daughter. You've raised her well." "Thank you. I'm trying." Single parenting is hard. I did it after my husband died. Natalie was 12, old enough to understand what happened, young enough to need a parent desperately. She poured tea that Daniel hadn't asked for but accepted anyway. I made a lot of mistakes, worked too much, let her grow up too fast. But we made it through. "Natalie turned out pretty remarkable," Daniel said. "She did. Stubborn as hell, workaholic tendencies, terrible at asking for help. But remarkable." Mrs. Brooks studied him over her teacup. "You love her?" It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am. And she loves you, which is honestly shocking because I didn't think Natalie knew how to love anything besides that company." She smiled. "But I see it. The way she looks at you, the way she talks about Emma. She's different, softer, better. I don't think I can take credit for that." "You don't have to take credit. Just keep showing up. That's all anyone can do, really. Show up and try and don't give up when it gets hard." It sounded like advice from someone who'd lived it. "I can do that," Daniel said. Emma emerged from the other room holding a trilobite fossil, like it was made of gold. "Dad, look! Mrs. Brooks says I can borrow it for show and tell if I promise to be careful." "That's very generous," Daniel said, making eye contact with Natalie's mother. "She reminds me of Natalie at that age. Curious, fearless, asks good questions." Mrs. Brooks stood. "Now, who wants to see embarrassing childhood photos of Natalie?" "I do," Emma said immediately. "Absolutely not," Natalie protested, but she was laughing. They spent the weekend in Boston, and it felt like something important was being built. Not just a relationship between Daniel and Natalie, but a family. Emma and Natalie bonding over museums and bad movies. Mrs. Brooks telling stories that made Natalie groan and Emma giggle. Daniel watching it all and feeling like he'd stumbled into something he didn't know he needed. On the plane ride home, Emma fell asleep against Natalie's shoulder, still clutching her borrowed trilobite. "Thank you for this weekend," Natalie said quietly, careful not to wake Emma. "Thank you for including us in your family. You are my family now, both of you." She adjusted slightly so Emma was more comfortable. "I know we haven't talked about logistics, where this is going long-term, what it looks like when my schedule gets crazy again, how we balance your custody arrangement with my work travel, but I want you to know I'm in this." Completely. For as long as you'll have me. Daniel kissed her, gentle enough not to disturb Emma. I'm in this too. We'll figure out the logistics. Together. That word again. Together. It kept showing up, settling into their conversations like it belonged there. 2 months later, Lucas Kane's trial began. Daniel didn't attend. He'd given his testimony to prosecutors and had no desire to sit through weeks of legal proceedings, but he followed the news coverage. The trial was brutal and swift. The evidence was overwhelming. Lucas's lawyers tried everything: procedural challenges, character witnesses, suggesting that Lucas was the real victim of a conspiracy, but none of it worked. The jury deliberated for 4 hours before returning with guilty verdicts on all counts. Sentencing came a week later. 22 years in federal prison. Daniel got the news via text from Jennifer. It's over. He's done. You and Emma are safe. He read it twice, then showed it to Natalie, who was sitting beside him in his living room working on her laptop. She read it and smiled. Good. He deserves every year of that sentence. I keep waiting to feel something, Daniel admitted. Relief? Vindication? Satisfaction? Something. What do you feel? Tired, like I've been holding my breath for months and I can finally exhale. He set his phone aside. And grateful for you, for Emma being safe, for everything working out despite how badly it could have gone wrong. It worked out because you made it work out. You saw the problem, you fixed it, and you didn't back down when it got dangerous. Natalie closed her laptop. That takes courage. Or stupidity. I'm still not sure which. Courage. Definitely courage. She moved closer. Speaking of courage, I have something to ask you. Daniel's heart rate picked up. Okay. Move in with me. You and Emma. Not right away. I know that's a huge change and Emma needs stability, and we should probably ease into it. But eventually, when you're ready, I want us to build a life together. A real one. Daniel had spent 2 years teaching himself to be cautious about relationships, to protect Emma from instability, to avoid making promises he couldn't keep. But looking at Natalie now, this woman who'd fought beside him, who loved his daughter like her own, who showed up even when it was hard, caution felt like the wrong choice. Yes, he said, not right away like you said, but yes, let's build something together. Natalie kissed him, and it felt like sealing a promise. 6 months later, Daniel and Emma moved into Natalie's house in the hills. Emma got her own room, decorated with dinosaur posters and soccer trophies, and the trilobite she'd eventually gotten to keep permanently. Daniel got used to living in a house that was too expensive and vaguely ridiculous. Natalie got used to the chaos of living with a 7-year-old who had opinions about everything. They made it work. Family dinners even when Natalie worked late. Emma's soccer games that Natalie attended whenever possible. Date nights where they hired babysitters and pretended to be adults without responsibilities for a few hours. Daniel's ex-wife had opinions about the living arrangement, but her opinions didn't matter much since she'd recently moved to Arizona with her new boyfriend and saw Emma even less than before. Work evolved. Daniel's team at Meridian uncovered 2 more instances of fraud, smaller than Lucas's scheme but significant, and Daniel built protocols to prevent it from happening again. Natalie led the company through its most profitable quarter in 5 years. Emma thrived. Her grades were excellent. Her soccer team won their division. She'd decided she definitely wanted to be a paleontologist, much to Mrs. Brooks's delight. A year after Lucas's conviction, Daniel and Natalie attended the annual Meridian Technologies Gala, the kind of formal event Daniel had always avoided but couldn't escape now that he was dating the CEO. Emma stayed with Mrs. Brooks, who'd flown out specifically to spend time with her favorite future paleontologist. Daniel wore a tuxedo that Natalie had insisted on buying him. Natalie wore a dress that probably cost more than his first car. They walked in together, not hiding, not pretending to be anything other than what they were. A couple. Partners. A family. The evening was predictably boring. Speeches about quarterly performance, awards for employee excellence, networking that felt like performance art. But halfway through dinner, Natalie leaned over and whispered, "Want to get out of here? This is your event. You're literally being honored as CEO of the year." I've been honored. I gave my speech. I smiled for photos. Now I want to leave with you and get burgers and go home to our daughter. Our daughter. Not your daughter or Emma. Our daughter. Daniel's chest tightened in the best possible way. Let's go. They snuck out the side entrance like teenagers escaping prom, laughing at the absurdity of a billionaire CEO and her VP ditching their own gala. They got burgers from a place near home that Emma loved. They picked her up from Mrs. Brooks, and she was still awake, buzzing with excitement about the fossil documentary they'd watched. Later, after Emma was asleep and Mrs. Brooks had gone to her guest room, Daniel and Natalie sat on their back patio overlooking the city lights. I keep thinking about the beach, Daniel said. That day I saw you with those financial reports. If I just walked past, if I hadn't stopped to look, but you did stop. You paid attention. You saw what everyone else missed. Natalie leaned against him. And now here we are. Here we are, Daniel echoed. Dating my former CEO, living in a house I couldn't afford in 1,000 years, raising a daughter who wants to dig up dinosaur bones for a living. Sounds terrible, Natalie said dryly. Sounds perfect, Daniel corrected. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe and sparkle below them. Emma asked me something yesterday, Natalie said eventually. She wanted to know if I was going to marry you. Daniel's heart stopped. What did you tell her? I told her that was between you and me, and that she'd be the first to know if anything changed. Natalie turned to look at him. But for the record, I would marry you, if you asked, whenever you're ready. No pressure. Daniel thought about everything they'd survived together, corporate fraud and criminal threats, and building a life from the chaos. He thought about Emma sleeping safely inside, about the home they'd created, about the future spreading out ahead of them like a promise. Ask me in a year, he said. Give Emma time to adjust to this living situation. Give us time to make sure this works long term, and then ask me. You want me to propose? You're the CEO. You're better at big gestures, Daniel smiled. Besides, I'm pretty sure I'd mess it up. I'd probably try to propose during a spreadsheet review or something equally unromantic. Natalie laughed. A year. I can wait a year. And then? And then we'll see what happens. Together. There was that word again. Together. It was the best word Daniel knew. 18 months after that conversation, Daniel stood in Natalie's living room wearing another tuxedo and watching Emma practice walking down an aisle they'd set up with chairs from the dining room. Like this, Dad? She took careful steps, clutching a basket of flower petals. Perfect, sweetheart. And I throw the petals, but not all at once, right? Just a few at a time? Just a few at a time. And then Natalie and you say the words, and then we're officially a family? Daniel knelt down to her level. We're already officially a family. The wedding just makes it legal. Madison says legal is important. Madison's right. Legal is important. He straightened her dress, a soft blue that she'd picked out herself. You okay with all this? Really okay? Emma considered the question seriously, the way she approached everything. I'm happy. Natalie makes you happy. And she lets me show her dinosaur facts even when she's busy. And she comes to my games, and she reads bedtime stories with the good voices. She looked up at Daniel. Is it okay that I'm happy Mom isn't here? Daniel's throat tightened. Your mom chose not to come. That's on her, not you. And yes, it's okay to be happy anyway. Okay, good. Because I am happy. Really happy. She hugged him, and Daniel held his daughter and thought about how far they'd come. From the wreckage of his divorce to this moment, preparing to marry someone who loved them both completely. The wedding itself was small, just family and close friends in the backyard of their home. Mrs. Brooks cried through the entire ceremony. Marcus gave a speech about how Daniel had finally learned to accept help. Emma performed her flower girl duties with the seriousness of a surgeon. And when Natalie and Daniel said their vows, promises about showing up and building together and choosing each other every single day, it felt like making official something that had been true for a long time. Afterward, Emma came running up. Can I call you Mom now? She asked Natalie. Natalie knelt down, and Daniel watched his wife's eyes fill with tears. Only if you want to. I want to, but I'll still call Dad Dad so nobody gets confused. That sounds perfect. Emma threw her arms around Natalie's neck, and Daniel captured the moment on his phone. His daughter and his wife, holding each other like they'd always belonged together. Years later, when Emma was in college studying paleontology and bringing home fossils and academic papers Daniel couldn't begin to understand, she'd sometimes ask how he and Natalie met. Daniel would tell her the truth. He'd been walking on a beach, trying to enjoy a day off, when he'd noticed his CEO with financial reports that didn't add up. He'd paid attention when everyone else would have looked away. He'd chosen to get involved when walking past would have been safer, and that choice, that moment of deciding to care about something that wasn't his problem, had changed everything. Because sometimes the best things in life started with noticing what everyone else missed, with showing up when it mattered, with refusing to walk away from the truth, no matter how complicated or dangerous it became. Daniel Reed had learned those lessons as a single father, had applied them to corporate fraud, had built a life and a family around the simple principle of paying attention and doing the right thing even when it was hard. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The end.